Hi there, and welcome to Bedtime Chills. Tonight, we have over 2 hours of true crime stories, told with the sound of rain and soft thunder in the background. If you enjoy the stories, tap the like button, share with your friends, and think about subscribing for more. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Leave a comment below. Now, get cozy, and let the stories begin. In the quiet, rural towns of Saga Prefecture, Japan, the 1970s and 1980s were marked by a chilling mystery that shattered the tranquility of everyday life. An unidentified serial killer, later dubbed the Wednesday Strangler, haunted the region, claiming the lives of 7 women and girls between 1975 and 1989. The killer's eerie pattern, 6 of the 7 victims vanished on Wednesday, gave the case its haunting name, while the brutality of the murders and the lack of resolution left a scar on the community. This is the story of a predator who moved like a phantom, the lives he stole, and the investigation that stumbled in the face of an elusive foe. The saga began on a warm summer evening, August 27, 1975, in the small town of Setagaya. Tomiko Yamasaki, a bright 12-year-old junior high school student, was home alone. Her mother, who ran a local bar, was at work, and Tomiko had spent the day with a friend who visited her at home. The friend left, and Tomiko was last seen alive by her, standing in the familiar safety of her own house. But sometime that evening, she vanished. Her mother returned to find the house empty, the silence deafening. Panic set in, and a search began, but there were no clues, no witnesses, no trace of the young girl. Days turned to weeks, and weeks to months, with no sign of Tomiko. The town whispered of abduction, but with no leads, the case grew cold, leaving her family in a limbo of grief and unanswered questions. Nearly 5 years later, on June 24, 1980, the mystery took a grim turn. In the nearby town of Shiroishi, police were investigating another disappearance when they made a horrifying discovery at Tsuko Elementary School. In a poolside septic tank, hidden beneath stones, they found skeletal remains. The remains were later identified as those of Tomiko Yamasaki, her young life snuffed out years earlier. The cause of death couldn't be determined due to the advanced decomposition, but the location, a place where children played, sent shivers through the community. Just 3 days later, on June 27th, the same septic tank yielded another set of remains. These belonged to a 20-year-old woman named Shizuko Harada, who had disappeared on April 19, 1980, a Saturday evening, from Setagaya. Like Tomiko, her body was too decomposed to reveal how she died, but the proximity of the discoveries linked the two cases in the minds of investigators. The killer, it seemed, had a penchant for hiding his victims in plain sight, in places that should have been safe. The police were now certain they were dealing with a predator, but the trail was already cold. Rumors swirled about a man who had connections to both victims. Some said he frequented the bar where Tomiko's mother worked, others whispered he had been dating Shizuko. The police arrested him, but the evidence was circumstantial at best. Without enough to hold him, he was released, and the case stalled. The community, meanwhile, grappled with fear. 2 young women, one barely a teenager, had been taken, their bodies discarded like refuse. The question lingered, was this the work of one killer, or were these tragedies unrelated? The answer came with chilling clarity on August 19, 1981, when another woman vanished. Ritsuko Nakao, a 27-year-old factory worker, disappeared from Kitashigaya on a Wednesday evening. Ritsuko was known for her quiet diligence, spending her days at a local factory and her evenings with family or friends. That night, she was last seen leaving her workplace, her steps fading into the dusk. Her family reported her missing when she didn't return home, but searches yielded nothing. Months later, her body was found in a secluded area near Kitashigaya, strangled. The method of killing was unmistakable, and the day of her disappearance, Wednesday, began to form a pattern that would define the case. The police now suspected a serial killer, one who operated with a terrifying consistency. The horror deepened on February 17, 1982, when an 11-year-old fifth grader, whose name was never released to the public, vanished in Setagaya. She was walking home from school, a route she took every day, when she disappeared. A fellow student was the last to see her alive, waving goodbye as they parted ways. Her parents, frantic when she didn't arrive home, alerted the police. The search was immediate, spurred by the memory of the earlier murders. The police and fire brigade combed the area through the night, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The next day, February 18th, their worst fears were confirmed. The girl's body was found behind a mandarin plantation, just north of Setagaya Junior High School's gymnasium, less than 2 kilometers from where Chizuko's remains had been discovered. She had been strangled, her small frame left in the underbrush. She was the youngest victim, and her death sent shockwaves through Saga Prefecture. Parents held their children closer, and the community's fear morphed into dread. The killer was not only still out there but growing bolder, targeting even children. Adding to the eerie nature of this murder was a strange detail. Around the time the girl's body was found, a friend of hers received a brief phone call from a woman claiming to be the missing child. The call was unsettling, the voice unfamiliar, and it ended abruptly. The next day, a postcard arrived, its message incomplete but chilling. It claimed the writer had intended to hold the girl for ransom but killed her when she made a fuss. The handwriting didn't match a similar letter sent in Ritsuko's case, but the police believed the cases were connected. Was the killer taunting them, or was this the work of a cruel prankster? The uncertainty only deepened the case's mystique. Years passed, and the trails seemed to grow colder. The police were frustrated, their leads exhausted, and the statute of limitations loomed over the earlier cases. Then, on July 8, 1987, the killer struck again. Sumiko Fujis, a 48-year-old restaurant employee in Takeo, vanished on a Wednesday evening. Sumiko was a hard-working woman, known for her warm smile and dedication to her job. She was last seen leaving the restaurant where she worked, heading into the night. Her disappearance went unnoticed at first, as she lived alone, but when she didn't show up for work, her employer alerted the authorities. Searches turned up nothing, and hope faded. It wasn't until January 27, 1989, that her body was found beneath a cliff at Setagaya Otoge. She had been strangled, her body left in a remote location that would soon become infamous. The final 2 victims were discovered in the same chilling location. On December 7, 1988, Kiyomi Nakajima, a 50-year-old housewife from Setagaya, disappeared on Wednesday. A local saw her with a man on a bicycle, a fleeting glimpse that was the last anyone saw of her. On January 10, 1989, Hisako Tsumo, a 49-year-old woman, also vanished from Setagaya on Wednesday. Her disappearance was reported quickly, but like the others, she seemed to have vanished into thin air. Then, on January 27, 1989, a couple driving near a mountain forest in the Kashima region spotted something horrifying: 3 bodies beneath the cliff at Setagaya Otoge. They were Sumiko, Kiyomi, and Hisako, all strangled, their bodies discarded together in what became known as the Setagaya Affair. The discovery of 3 bodies in one place galvanized the police. The similarities were undeniable. The victims were all women, most vanished on Wednesdays, and 5 of the 7 were strangled. 6 of the 7 had their clothes partially or fully removed, suggesting a sexual motive, though the 3rd victim, Ritsuko, was found fully clothed. The geographic proximity, within a 20-kilometer radius in the towns of Setagaya, Shiroishi, Setagaya, and Takeo, pointed to a single predator. The police poured resources into the case, determined to catch the killer before he struck again. A suspect emerged in 1989, a man linked to the Setagaya affair. The police arrested him, and the prosecution built a case around the murders of Sumiko, Kiyomi, and Hisako. The evidence included witness statements and circumstantial connections, but it was shaky. The trial began, and the community held its breath, hoping for justice. But in court, the case unraveled. The suspect's defense argued there was no direct evidence tying him to the crimes, and the judge agreed. He was acquitted, leaving the police empty-handed. The prosecution appealed, but the Fukuoka High Court upheld the acquittal on March 19, 2007. In a desperate bid, prosecutors tried to use mitochondrial DNA evidence, but it too failed to link the suspect conclusively. The Saga Prefectural Police later admitted to a flawed investigation, including over-interrogating the suspect, and the case was closed with no convictions. The statute of limitations had already expired for the fourth case, Ritsuko's murder, meaning no one could be prosecuted for it. By 2007, the same fate befell the remaining cases. Under Japanese law, the time limit for prosecuting murder was 15 years at the time, and with no new evidence, the cases were effectively dead. The Wednesday Strangler had slipped through the cracks, leaving behind a trail of devastation and unanswered questions. The victims' stories are heartbreaking in their simplicity. Tomiko Yamasaki, the 12-year-old who dreamed of her future, was taken from her own home. Chizuko Harada, the 20-year-old whose life was just beginning, was reduced to bones in a septic tank. Ritsuko Nakao, the 27-year-old factory worker, was stolen from her routine. The unnamed 11-year-old, whose innocence was her only crime, was silenced forever. Sumiko Fujis, the 48-year-old who brought warmth to her restaurant, was discarded in the wilderness. Kiyomi Nakajima, the 50-year-old housewife, and Hisako Tsumo, the 49-year-old whose life was intertwined with her community, were left beneath a cliff. Each woman, each girl, was a thread in the fabric of Saga Prefecture, and their loss unraveled the sense of safety that once defined the region. The investigation was marred by missteps from the start. The police were slow to connect the early cases, treating Tomiko and Chizuko's disappearances as isolated until their bodies were found together. The reliance on circumstantial evidence and the failure to secure physical proof haunted the Setagaya affair trial. The strange phone call and postcard in the 11-year-old's case were never fully explained, leaving open the possibility of a killer who toyed with his pursuers. The police's admission of a poor investigation was a bitter pill for the victims' families, who watched justice slip away as the years ticked by. The Wednesday Strangler's motives remain a mystery. Was the Wednesday pattern deliberate, a signature meant to taunt the police, or a coincidence born of opportunity? The choice of victims, ranging from an 11-year-old to women in their late 40s, suggests a predator who didn't discriminate by age but was driven by access and vulnerability. The strangulation method, used in 5 cases, points to a hands-on killer, one who relished control. The removal of clothing in most cases hints at a sexual component, though the lack of definitive evidence leaves this unclear. The disposal sites, septic tanks, plantations, cliffs suggest a killer familiar with the area, someone who knew where to hide his crimes. Theories abound, but none have been proven. Some believe the killer was a local, perhaps a man who blended into the community, unnoticed. The sighting of a man in his 30s before the 11-year-old's murder and the bicyclist with Kiyomi Nakajima fuel this idea. Others wonder if the Wednesday pattern was a red herring, with some cases unrelated. The 5-year gap between the 1982 and 1,987 murders raises questions. Did the killer stop, only to resume, or were there other victims never found? The possibility of multiple killers has been floated, given the change in victim profiles and disposal methods, but the geographic and methodological consistencies argue against it. The case's cultural impact is undeniable. In a country where violent crime was rare, the Wednesday Strangler was a boogeyman, a reminder that danger could lurk in the most ordinary places. The murders prompted changes in how communities viewed safety, with parents keeping closer watch on their children and women avoiding solitary walks at night. The case also highlighted flaws in Japan's legal system, particularly the statute of limitations, which was extended for murder cases in 2010, too late for the strangler's victims. Today, the Wednesday Strangler remains one of Japan's most infamous unsolved mysteries. The towns of Setagaya, Shiroishi, Kitashigayasu, and Takeo have changed. Some have merged into larger cities like Miyake and Takeo, but the shadow of the killings lingers. The families of the victims carry the weight of their loss, their hope for justice extinguished by time. The police, humbled by their failures, have moved on, but the case remains a cautionary tale of a killer who outwitted them. Who was the Wednesday Strangler? Was he a neighbor, a passerby, a face no one suspected? Did he die, taking his secrets to the grave, or is he still out there, an old man now, living with the knowledge of his crimes? The answers are buried in the past, in the quiet fields and forests of Saga Prefecture, where 7 women met their end. Their names, Tomiko, Chizuko, Ritsuko, the unnamed girl, Sumiko, Kiyomi, Hisako, are a reminder of lives stolen and a killer who vanished into the night, leaving only questions in his wake. In the spring of 1984, the city of Nishinomiya, Japan, was a quiet, orderly place, its streets lined with modest homes and the air carrying the faint sweetness of cherry blossoms. It was here, in a well-to-do neighborhood, that the first act of one of Japan's most baffling criminal sagas unfolded. On the evening of March 18th, Katsuhisa Izaki, the president of Izaki Glico, a beloved confectionery company known for Pocky and Pretz, was soaking in his bathtub, unaware of the terror about to invade his home. Glico was a household name, its candies a staple in stores across Japan and beyond, symbolizing the country's post-war economic boom. But that night, the company's success would make it a target for a shadowy group that would come to be known as the Monster with 21 Faces. At around 9 p.m., 2 masked men, their faces obscured by darkness and malice, crept onto the Izaki family property. They carried a pistol and a rifle, though later investigations would suggest these were likely toy guns, meticulously chosen to intimidate without leaving ballistic evidence. Their first stop was the adjacent home of Katsuhisa's 70-year-old mother, Yoshi. The intruders broke in, moving with chilling precision. They tied Yoshi up with a cut telephone cord, her frail hands trembling as she realized the danger. From her home, they stole a key, one that granted access to Katsuhisa's residence. This detail, the use of a specific key, suggested the intruders had intimate knowledge of the family's habits and the layout of their property, hinting at a meticulously planned operation. Slipping into Katsuhisa's home, the men found his wife and eldest daughter. They bound them tightly, ignoring the wife's desperate offer of money. "Be quiet. Money is irrelevant," one of the intruders growled, his voice cold and deliberate. Their target was Katsuhisa himself. Bursting into the bathroom, they dragged the startled executive from his bath, forcing him into a car waiting outside. The vehicle sped off into the night, taking Katsuhisa to a warehouse in Ibaraki, Osaka, where he was held captive. The kidnappers demanded an unprecedented ransom, 1 billion yen, roughly $4.2 million in 1984 dollars, and 220 pounds of gold bullion. It was the largest ransom demand in Japanese history, a brazen challenge to both Glico and the authorities. The Japanese police, renowned for their efficiency, sprang into action. In 1983, they had solved 97.1% of murder cases and 55.3% of thefts, a record that made them the envy of law enforcement worldwide. A kidnapping of this magnitude, however, was rare. Only 27 had been reported the previous year. The police imposed a media blackout, believing that publicizing the case might provoke the kidnappers to harm Izaki. They scoured the Azaki family's connections, suspecting the culprits might be disgruntled employees or personal acquaintances, given the familiarity implied by the stolen key. But the trail was cold, the kidnappers' movements ghostly. Remarkably, Katsuhisa Azaki escaped after 3 days. Details of his escape remain sparse, but he managed to free himself from his restraints and flee the warehouse, returning home shaken but unharmed. The ransom went unpaid, and the police, relieved yet frustrated, hoped the ordeal was over. They were wrong. The kidnapping was merely the opening salvo in a campaign of terror that would grip Japan for 17 months, orchestrated by a group calling itself the Monster with 21 Faces, a name borrowed from a fictional villain in Edogawa Rampo's detective novels. This alias, dripping with theatrical menace, would become synonymous with a criminal enterprise that defied comprehension. The Monster's next move came on April 8, 1984, when the press received a taunting letter. Addressed to the police fools, it mocked the authorities' inability to catch them. "Are you all stupid? What the hell are you doing with all that manpower?" the letter sneered. It offered cryptic hints. The car they used was gray, the food they bought was from the Dei supermarket chain, and none of them were among Azaki's relatives or the Nishinomiya police. The letter ended with a chilling threat: "Shall we kidnap the head of the prefectural police, too?" The Monster was not just a criminal group, it was a psychological predator, reveling in its ability to humiliate Japan's finest. 2 days later, on April 10th, the Monster escalated its attacks. Several vehicles in the parking lot of Glico's trial production building were set ablaze, the flames lighting up the Osaka night. The arson was a direct assault on Glico's operations, a message that the Monster's reach extended beyond personal threats. Then, on April 16th, a bottle of hydrochloric acid, accompanied by a letter demanding 60 million yen, arrived at Azaki's home. The reduced ransom suggested the Monster was toying with its victims, more interested in chaos than cash. Days later, 2 fires erupted at Glico's headquarters, further straining the company's resources and the police's resolve. By May 10th, the Monster's campaign took a sinister turn. Letters began arriving at Glico's offices, claiming that the company's candies had been laced with potassium cyanide, a deadly poison. The Monster threatened to place these tampered products on store shelves, forcing Glico to pull its entire inventory nationwide. The recall was catastrophic, costing the company over $21 million and forcing the layoff of 450 part-time workers. Supermarkets and convenience stores, once brimming with Pocky and Pretz, stood empty, their shelves a silent testament to the Monster's power. The Japanese public, accustomed to trusting their food supply, grew anxious. Parents checked their children's candy stashes, and Glico's reputation teetered on the brink. They were typed on a pan-writer typewriter, a common model that offered little forensic value. One letter, sent to the Sankei and Mainichi newspapers and the Koshian police station on April 23rd, accused the police of lying and hiding evidence. "I entered the factory from the side staff entrance," it boasted, detailing the Monster's methods with infuriating confidence. Another letter, received in June, declared, "We forgive Glico." A sudden, inexplicable ceasefire. The Monster claimed Azaki had gone around with his head hanging down long enough and announced it would spare the company further torment. Glico officials denied paying any ransom, and the police were baffled. Why would the Monster relent? The answer came swiftly. The Monster wasn't done, it had merely shifted targets. By late June 1984, the group turned its attention to Morinaga, another confectionery giant, as well as Maruta Ham and House Foods Corporation. On November 1st, a threatening letter arrived at the Tokyo home of Morinaga Dairy's vice president, Mitsuo Yamada, demanding 200 million yen and instructing the company to place a coded message in the Mainichi newspaper's missing persons section. The message, published on November 6th, read, "Dear Jiro, bad friend disappeared. Come back. Warm meal is waiting. Mother Chiyoko." It was a bizarre, almost playful code, but its intent was deadly serious. Morinaga, like Glico, faced threats of poison products, and soon, cyanide-laced candies began appearing on store shelves, each package marked to alert authorities but still sowing panic. The police, now numbering over 1 million officers working the case in some capacity, chased every lead. They investigated 125,000 persons of interest and followed 28,000 tips, but the monster remained elusive. Surveillance footage from a family mart in Nishinomiya offered a rare glimpse of a suspect, a man in his 20s or 30s, wearing a Yomiuri Giants baseball cap and metal-framed glasses, placing Glico chocolate on a shelf. The grainy, overused tape yielded a ghostly image, but it was enough to release to the public. Dubbed the videotape man, he became a focal point of the investigation, yet his identity remained unknown. Another suspect, the fox-eyed man, was spotted near ransom drop-off locations, his sharp, angular features captured in a police sketch. Despite these clues, the monster's core members slipped through the cracks. The monster's letters grew bolder, their tone almost gleeful. They mocked the police's reliance on old-style investigation techniques, as one New York Times article noted, quoting expert Takuro Suzuki. The Japanese police, once revered, faced mounting criticism. Public trust eroded further when it emerged that forced confessions had led to wrongful convictions in other cases, casting doubt on the force's integrity. For Superintendent Shoji Yamamoto, the case became an obsession. He fixated on physical evidence, like the code Izaki wore during his captivity, hoping for a breakthrough. But the items were either stolen or mass-produced, offering no traceable leads. The pressure was unbearable, and the monster's taunts cut deep. In October 1984, the monster's campaign intensified. Tainted Morinaga candies appeared in stores, each laced with enough cyanide to kill. The packages were clearly marked, suggesting the monster wanted to instill fear rather than cause mass casualties. Still, the discovery sent shockwaves through Japan, especially as Valentine's Day 1985 approached, a candy-heavy holiday. The police feared a second wave of poisonings, and companies like Fujiya, Meiji, and Mate received threatening letters. The monster's reach seemed limitless, its motives inscrutable. Was it driven by financial gain, revenge, or pure anarchy? Theories abounded, from Yakuza involvement to disgruntled former employees, but no evidence solidified any hypothesis. The case took a tragic turn in August 1985. Superintendent Yamamoto, overwhelmed by shame and failure, walked into his backyard, doused himself in kerosene, and set himself ablaze. His suicide was a stark symbol of the monster's devastating impact, not just on its corporate targets but on the psyche of Japan's law enforcement. Days later, the monster sent its final letter, addressed to our fans throughout Japan. It expressed regret for Yamamoto's death, stating, "We didn't want to cause such tragedy." The letter announced the group's retirement, claiming they were tired of playing this game. And with that, the monster with 21 faces vanished. The police continued their investigation, but the trail grew colder. The statute of limitations for Izaki's kidnapping expired in June 1995, and for the attempted poisonings in February 2000. No one was ever charged, despite the unprecedented manpower devoted to the case. The monster's true identity remained a mystery, its motives a puzzle that baffled criminologists. Some speculated the group was a sophisticated syndicate, possibly linked to organized crime, given the scale and coordination of their attacks. Others believed it was a small, ideologically driven cell, perhaps protesting Japan's corporate culture or police authority. The use of the Kansai dialect and references to local stores like Dei suggested a regional connection, but this too led nowhere. The Glico Morinaga case, officially designated Metropolitan Designated Case 114, left a lasting scar on Japan. Glico and Morinaga recovered, but their brands bore the weight of the ordeal for years. The Japanese public, once confident in their institutions, grappled with a new reality. Even their vaunted police could be outwitted. The monster's letters, over 100 in total, were a chilling archive of audacity, each one a reminder of a faceless enemy that toyed with a nation. The videotaped man and the fox-eyed man became ghostly figures in Japan's collective imagination, their blurry images haunting newsreels and true crime discussions. Decades later, the case remains unsolved, a dark chapter in Japan's history that resists closure. The monster with 21 faces achieved what few criminals do: complete anonymity and enduring infamy. Their campaign was not just a series of crimes but a performance, a macabre dance with Japan's authorities and its people. They exposed vulnerabilities in a society that prided itself on order, turning candy, the simplest of pleasures, into a symbol of fear. For 17 months, they held Japan in their grip, and when they chose to disappear, they left behind a question that lingers to this day: who were they, and why did they stop? The warehouse in Ibaraki stands empty now, its walls silent. The shelves of Nishinomiya's convenience stores are stocked once more with Pocky and Morinaga chocolates, their wrappers bright and untainted. But for those who remember the spring of 1984, the monster's shadow lingers, a reminder that some mysteries are too cunning, too elusive, to ever be resolved. In the quiet town of Eufaula, Oklahoma, where life moved slowly and neighbors knew each other's names, the Jamison family lived what seemed to be an ordinary existence. Bobby Dale Jamison, 44, his wife Sherilyn Leanne Jamison, 40, and their 6-year-old daughter, Madison Stormy Star Jamison, were a small family with big dreams. They resided in a modest home by Eufaula Lake, surrounded by the rolling hills and dense forests of southeastern Oklahoma. But beneath the surface of their seemingly normal lives, there were undercurrents of tension, paranoia, and secrets that would culminate in one of the most baffling mysteries in modern true crime history. On October 8, 2009, the Jamisons vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of clues that would confound investigators, spark wild theories, and haunt those who followed their story. For years later, their skeletal remains were found in a remote corner of the Sans Blom Mountains, but the questions surrounding their deaths only deepened. This is the story of the Jamison family's disappearance, a case that remains unsolved, shrouded in enigma, and marked by a chilling absence of answers. The Jamisons were not strangers to hardship. Bobby, a tall man with a quiet demeanor, had been grappling with chronic back pain since a devastating car accident in 2003. The crash, caused by 2 vehicles colliding with his own, left him with injuries that made physical labor impossible. He relied on disability checks to support the family, a necessity that limited their financial freedom but didn't dampen their aspirations. Sherilyn, a spirited woman with a quick smile, also faced her own struggles. She had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a condition that sometimes casts shadows over her moods and decisions. The loss of her sister in 2007, who died tragically from a bee sting on her tongue, had left Sherilyn devastated, and her mental health challenges intensified. She had been hospitalized after a suicide attempt, and in July 2009, her 12-year-old son from a previous relationship moved to Oklahoma City to live with his father, a change that strained the family's finances further as child support payments ceased. Despite these challenges, the Jamisons were devoted to their daughter, Madison, a bright and curious child with a mop of lightened hair, whose infectious energy brought light to their lives. The family's home in Eufaula was a place of both comfort and unease. Friends and family reported that Bobby and Sherilyn believed their house was haunted. They spoke of strange occurrences, objects moving inexplicably, eerie feelings of being watched, and whispers in the night. Sherilyn confided in her best friend, Nikki Chenault, that the house carried a horrible presence that left her feeling drained and depressed. Bobby, too, was convinced that spirits lingered in their home. He approached their pastor, Gary Brandon, with an unusual request. He wanted to know where he could find special bullets to shoot the ghosts he believed were perched on their roof. On another occasion, he mentioned owning a copy of the Satanic Bible by Anton Lavey, claiming he intended to use it to exorcise the malevolent entities. Sherilyn, meanwhile, told the pastor that Madison had been speaking to an invisible friend named Emily, a detail that some dismissed as a child's imagination but others saw as evidence of the family's growing paranoia. Whether these beliefs stem from mental health struggles, spiritual convictions, or something else entirely, they painted a picture of a family increasingly detached from reality. In the months leading up to their disappearance, the Jamisons made a bold decision. They wanted to leave Eufaula and start anew. They set their sights on a 40-acre plot of land near Red Oak, about 30 miles away in the rugged Sans Bois Mountains. The property was remote, a place where they could live simply, perhaps in a storage container they already owned. The idea of escaping the confines of their haunted home and building a new life in the wilderness appealed to them. Bobby and Sherilyn were private people, often keeping their plans close to the chest, but they shared their excitement about the land purchase with a few close contacts. On October 8, 2009, they packed their white pickup truck, loaded Madison and their small black and white dog, Maisie, into the vehicle, and set off to meet an associate of the landowner to discuss the deal. It was a crisp autumn day, the kind where the Oklahoma air carried a hint of chill and the forests glowed with shades of amber and crimson. The Jamisons were last seen by a local man who lived in the mountains, who noted nothing unusual about their demeanor. They appeared to be a family on a mission, focused on their future. What happened next remains one of the most perplexing aspects of the case. The Jamisons never returned home. Days passed with no word from them, and concern began to mount among their friends and family. Bobby and Sherilyn were known to occasionally go off the radar, but their prolonged silence, coupled with Madison's absence, raised alarms. On October 16, 2009, 8 days after they were last seen, a hunter riding a dirt bike stumbled upon their white pickup truck abandoned on a remote well-pad site in Latimer County, just south of Kinta and northwest of Red Oak. The vehicle was locked, parked in the middle of a dirt track, and showed no signs of a struggle. When authorities arrived, they were stunned by what they found inside. Bobby's wallet, Sherilyn's purse, their cell phones, a GPS unit, jackets, and other personal items were all present, as if the family had planned to return. Most shockingly, a bank envelope stashed beneath the driver's seat contained $32,000 in cash, an extraordinary sum for a family living on disability benefits. The only living occupant was Maisie, the family's dog, who was malnourished and dehydrated but alive after surviving 8 days without food or water. The scene suggested that the Jamisons had left the truck willingly or under duress, but there were no footprints, no blood, no signs of violence to indicate what had happened. Investigators immediately launched a search, mobilizing over 300 people, including volunteers, law enforcement, and air support, to comb the rugged terrain of the Sans Bois Mountains. The area was dense with forests and steep hills, a place where it was easy to get lost or disoriented. The weather in mid-October had been chilly, with temperatures dipping to around 40 degrees Fahrenheit at night, and heavy rains had soaked the region in the days following the Jamisons' disappearance. Despite the extensive effort, the search yielded nothing, no clothing, no personal items, no trace of the family. The GPS unit in the truck provided a small clue. It showed that the Jamisons had taken a short 15-minute walk from their vehicle to a hillside nearby, possibly to survey the land, before returning to the truck and driving a short distance further. The way the truck was parked suggested they had been stopped abruptly, perhaps by someone they recognized or an unexpected obstacle. Former Latimer County Sheriff Israel Beecham, who led the initial investigation, believed the family had been forced to stop and exit the vehicle either willingly or by force. There didn't appear to be any sign they were in trouble or looking to start a new life, he later remarked, dismissing the idea that they had vanished voluntarily. As the search efforts waned and the case grew colder, investigators turned to the Jamisons' home in Eufaula for answers. Surveillance footage from cameras mounted outside their lake house provided a haunting glimpse into their final hours. Timestamped on October 8, 2009, the video showed Bobby and Sherilyn packing their truck in preparation for the trip. They moved back and forth between the house and the vehicle, carrying boxes and bags in a methodical but eerily silent manner. They did not speak to each other or acknowledge one another's presence, their movements described by investigators as trance-like. At one point, Sherilyn placed a brown briefcase in the truck, an item that Sheriff Beecham later noted could be a critical clue. Neither the briefcase nor Sherilyn's .22 caliber handgun, which she was known to carry, were found in the truck or elsewhere. The footage raised more questions than answers. Were the Jamisons under the influence of drugs? Were they in a state of mental distress? Or was their behavior simply a reflection of focused determination as they prepared for a significant life change? The discovery of the $32,000 in cash fueled speculation about the family's activities. The Jamisons were not known to carry large sums of money, and their reliance on disability checks made the presence of such a substantial amount puzzling. Some theorized that the money was intended for the land purchase, though no evidence confirmed this. Others suggested the Jamisons were involved in drug trafficking, particularly methamphetamine, which was prevalent in the region. Neighbors have reported that Bobby and Sherilyn had appeared gaunt and erratic in the months before their disappearance, and their trance-like behavior in the surveillance footage lent credence to the drug theory. However, searches of their home and truck found no traces of drugs or paraphernalia, and friends and family adamantly denied that the Jamisons were users or dealers. Another possibility was that the money was related to a settlement from Bobby's car accident, though Sherilyn's mother, Connie Coco-Tan, stated she was unaware of any such payout. The cash remained one of the case's most tantalizing mysteries, a piece of the puzzle that seemed to promise answers but delivered none. The Jamisons' personal lives offered additional avenues for investigation. Bobby had been embroiled in a bitter feud with his father, Bob Dean Jamison, a man with a reputation for volatility. In November 2008, Bobby filed a protective order against his father, alleging that Bob Dean had threatened the family and even struck Bobby with his vehicle during a dispute. Bobby claimed his father was involved in methamphetamine production and other criminal activities, accusations that added a layer of intrigue to the case. The two had worked together at a gas station owned by Bob Dean, and Bobby was suing his parents, claiming he was owed property and vehicles for years of unpaid labor. The lawsuit was still pending when the Jamisons disappeared, and the protective order had been dismissed. Bob Dean died in December 2009, just 2 months after the family vanished, and police ultimately ruled him out as a suspect. However, the strained relationship raised the possibility that someone connected to Bob Dean's circle could have targeted the Jamisons, though no evidence supported this theory. Another lead emerged from the Jamisons' brief association with a man named Kenneth Bellows, who had lived with the family as a handyman in the months before their disappearance. The Jamisons' property was large, and with Bobby's physical limitations and Sherilyn's mental health struggles, they needed help maintaining it. Bellows was questioned by the FBI, but no evidence linked him to the family's fate. More disturbingly, Sherilyn's mother, Connie Coco-Tan, believed the Jamisons had crossed paths with a religious cult operating in southeastern Oklahoma. She claimed Sherilyn was on a hit list maintained by the group, possibly due to an earlier incident involving a tenant they had evicted. The Jamisons had rented a room to a man with ties to a white nationalist group called the United Knights, and after discovering his affiliations, they forced him to leave. Coco-Tan was convinced the cult was responsible for the family's deaths, though she never named a specific organization, and investigators found no evidence to substantiate her claims. The cult theory, while compelling, remained speculative, adding to the case's aura of strangeness. As months turned to years, the Jamison case faded from the headlines, but it never left the public's imagination. It was profiled on the investigation Discovery series Disappeared in 2010 in an episode titled Paradise Lost, which brought renewed attention to the mystery. Theories proliferated online, ranging from the plausible to the outlandish. Some believe the Jamisons had faked their deaths to escape financial or legal troubles, though the presence of their personal items and cash in the truck made this unlikely. Others speculated they were in witness protection, perhaps informing on local drug traffickers, but no official records supported this idea. The notion of a murder-suicide gained traction after investigators found 2 letters written by Sherilyn. One, an 11-page missive found in the truck, was a scathing critique of Bobby, calling him a hermit and expressing deep frustration with their marriage. Another letter, discovered in their home, discussed death in vague terms, prompting Sheriff Beecham to remark that the Jamisons were a family obsessed with death. However, the absence of Sherilyn's handgun and the positioning of the bodies would later complicate this theory. The case took a grim turn on November 16, 2013, when 2 hunters scouting deer locations in the Sans Bois Mountains stumbled upon skeletal remains in a remote area of Latimer County. The discovery was less than 3 miles from where the Jamisons' truck had been found 4 years earlier, a fact that baffled investigators, as the initial search had covered the region extensively. The remains consisted of 2 adults and 1 child, along with fragments of clothing, shoes, adult teeth, and bone fragments. The Oklahoma Medical Examiner's Office, led by Dr. Joshua Lanter, conducted anthropological and forensic pathological testing to confirm the identities. On July 3, 2014, the remains were officially identified as Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison Jamison. The condition of the skeletons was poor, with significant damage from weather, carnivores, and rodents. Bobby's skull had a small hole that some speculated could be a bullet wound, but Lanter noted it could also have resulted from animal predation. Due to the advanced decomposition and incomplete remains, no cause of death could be determined. The autopsy reports listed the manner of death as unknown, with no evidence of perimortem trauma, though foul play could not be ruled out. The discovery of the remains reignited interest in the case but provided little clarity. The positioning of the bodies, laid out side by side, face down, struck investigators as unusual. If the Jamisons had succumbed to hypothermia, as some theorized, it seemed unlikely they would have died in such an orderly formation. The Sans Bois Mountains were chilly in October, but 40-degree temperatures were not typically lethal, especially for a family dressed for the weather. The absence of their coats, which were found in the truck, raised questions about whether they had been caught unprepared, but the proximity of the remains to the truck, less than 3 miles, made it hard to believe they had simply gotten lost. The murder-suicide theory was reconsidered, but the missing handgun and the logistical difficulty of one parent killing the others and then themselves in such a precise arrangement weakened its plausibility. The idea of a third-party killer was more compelling, but the lack of a clear motive or suspect left investigators at a standstill. If the Jamisons had been murdered, why had the killer left $32,000 untouched? And why had the bodies remained undiscovered for so long in an area that had been searched? The Jamison family's story is a tapestry of contradictions and unanswered questions. The $32,000 in cash, the trance-like surveillance footage, the missing briefcase and handgun, the tales of hauntings and cults, the feud with Bobby's father, all these elements swirl together, creating a narrative that is as frustrating as it is fascinating. Sheriff Beauchamp's words encapsulate the case's complexity. Normally, you can go through an investigation and, one by one, start to eliminate certain scenarios. We haven't been able to do that in this case. With this family, everything seems possible. For Connie Coco Tan, the loss of her daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter is a wound that will never heal. She remains steadfast in her belief that the Jamisons were murdered, possibly by a cult, and that the truth is still out there, buried in the mountains or hidden in the memories of someone who knows more than they've shared. The Sans Bois Mountains keep their secrets well. The rugged terrain, with its dense forests and winding trails, seems to swallow stories whole, leaving only fragments for those who seek answers. The Jamisons' truck, their belongings, and their remains are pieces of a puzzle that refuses to come together. Were they victims of a random act of violence, caught in a drug deal gone wrong, or ensnared by their own fears and delusions? Did they walk into the wilderness willingly, or were they led there by someone with sinister intentions? The truth may lie in the missing briefcase, the unrecovered handgun, or the memories of a witness who has yet to come forward. Until those answers surface, the Jamison family's fate remains a haunting enigma, a reminder that some mysteries are as enduring as the mountains themselves. In the spring of 1985, Japan was a nation on the cusp of modernity, its cities buzzing with vending machines that dispensed everything from hot coffee to cigarettes. These machines, numbering over 5.2 million across the country, were a symbol of convenience, dotting street corners, train stations, and quiet suburban neighborhoods. They were so ubiquitous that they blended into the fabric of daily life, trusted implicitly by a society that prided itself on order and safety. But that trust would be shattered in a series of chilling, indiscriminate poisonings that would come to be known as the paraquat murders, a case that remains one of the most perplexing and deadly product tampering sprees in history. The story began on April 30th, 1985, in Fukuyama, a mid-sized city in Hiroshima Prefecture, nestled in Japan's western region. It was an unremarkable Tuesday, the kind of day where people went about their routines without a second thought. A man, whose name has been lost to the broader narrative but whose fate would spark a national crisis, was walking through the city when he spotted a bottle of Manami C, a popular vitamin-infused energy drink, perched atop a vending machine. The bottle was free, a small gift in a country where such promotions were not uncommon. Manami C, produced by Otsuka Pharmaceutical, was a staple for middle-aged men, its tangy, citrusy flavor a quick pick-me-up during long workdays. At the time, the company was running a buy-one-get-one-free promotion to boost sales among younger consumers, a campaign that inadvertently set the stage for tragedy. The man took the bottle, cracked it open, and drank. Within hours, he was racked with excruciating pain. His throat burned, his stomach churned, and his body began to shut down. By the time he reached a hospital, it was too late. Doctors were baffled by the severity of his symptoms. Ulcers erupted in his mouth, his kidneys began to fail, and his lungs filled with fluid. He died in agony, his body ravaged by a poison later identified as paraquat dichloride, a highly toxic herbicide used to kill weeds. Paraquat was a chemical so lethal that a single sip could destroy the human body in days, sometimes hours, attacking the lungs, liver, and kidneys with ruthless efficiency. In 1984 alone, 1,402 people in Japan had used it to take their own lives, a testament to its accessibility and deadly potency. At first, the Fukuyama case seemed like an isolated tragedy, perhaps a suicide or an accident. Paraquat was widely available in Japan, sold without prescription or identification, though buyers were supposed to prove they needed it for agricultural purposes. It was a chemical farmers knew well, but one that had no place in a bottle of Manami C. Authorities initially suspected contamination at the manufacturing level, but tests on other bottles from the same batch came back clean. The realization crept in slowly. Someone had deliberately laced the drink with poison and left it for an unsuspecting victim to find. As spring turned to summer, the poisonings continued. The pattern was chillingly consistent. Bottles of Manami C, and occasionally other beverages like Real Gold or Coca-Cola, were found in or around vending machines, often in low-traffic areas where no one would notice a stranger tampering with them. The drinks were laced with paraquat, and sometimes its chemical cousin, diquat, which was nearly as deadly. The victims were random, spanning ages, genders, and walks of life. There was no discernible connection between them, no shared enemies or motives that could point to a single perpetrator. The killer, or killers, struck with a cold, calculated randomness that made the case all the more terrifying. By September, the murders had escalated, spreading from western and central Japan to the bustling capital of Tokyo. On September 5th, 44-year-old executive Takashi Sakai was on his way home when he grabbed 2 vitamin drinks from a vending machine in Tokyo. He drank them, unaware that they were laced with paraquat. For 6 agonizing weeks, Sakai fought for his life in a hospital, his body deteriorating as the poison tore through his organs. He died in mid-October, leaving behind a family and colleagues who could scarcely comprehend the senselessness of his death. Just 6 days later, on September 11th, 52-year-old Haruo Otsu became another victim. Otsu, a typical Japanese salaryman, was walking through Tokyo when he spotted a free bottle of Aromamin near a vending machine. Like so many others, he thought he'd gotten lucky, a small perk in an otherwise ordinary day. He drank the contents and was dead within 52 hours. The speed of his decline shocked doctors, who noted the telltale signs of paraquat poisoning, swelling in the throat, bloody diarrhea, and catastrophic organ failure. Otsu's death was a stark reminder that no one was safe, not even in the heart of Japan's capital. The poisonings continued through late September. On September 25th, a man in Wakayama Prefecture fell gravely ill after drinking a tainted beverage. The next day, a 40-year-old woman in Shizuoka Prefecture suffered the same fate. Both survived but were left with severe health complications, their bodies scarred by the poison's relentless assault. The final known victim was either Takashi Sakai or a 17-year-old girl from Saitama Prefecture, though records are unclear on the exact timeline. What was clear was the toll. At least 12 people were dead, and 35 others had been seriously injured, some permanently disabled. As the body count rose, Japan was gripped by fear. Vending machines, once a symbol of convenience, became objects of suspicion. People stopped trusting free drinks, and sales of Aromamin plummeted. Otsuka Pharmaceutical scrambled to contain the fallout, issuing public apologies and pulling bottles from shelves. Warning labels and leaflets sprouted across Tokyo and beyond, plastered on vending machines and distributed in neighborhoods. Do not drink abandoned beverages, they cautioned, a stark warning in a country unaccustomed to such brazen criminality. Operators of the nation's 5.2 million vending machines began patrolling their units, checking for tampered bottles and urging customers to buy only from the machines themselves. The police were under immense pressure to catch the culprit. Japan's National Police Agency launched one of the largest investigations in its history, deploying hundreds of officers to scour vending machine locations, interview witnesses, and analyze the poisoned bottles. But the case was maddeningly elusive. The killer left no fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses. The low traffic areas chosen for the poisonings meant there were few, if any, surveillance cameras, a rarity in 1985 Japan. The bottles themselves offered little in the way of clues. They were standard, mass-produced containers, and the paraquat was easily obtainable, requiring no special access or expertise to acquire. Investigators theorized that the crimes were the work of a single individual, though they couldn't rule out a small group. The methodical nature of the poisonings, lacing bottles, placing them strategically, and vanishing without a trace, suggested a level of planning and discipline. But the randomness of the victims baffled detectives. There was no pattern to suggest a personal vendetta, no evidence of extortion or demands, as had been the case in other high-profile tampering cases, like the 1982 Tylenol murders in the United States. The police noted that the crimes seemed motiveless, a series of thrill killings designed to sow fear and chaos. Psychologists began to speak of a new kind of criminal, a UKN, or thrill seeker, who derived satisfaction from the act of killing itself. The choice of paraquat as the murder weapon added another layer of horror. Paraquat dichloride, known commercially as gramoxone, was a herbicide that had revolutionized farming since its introduction in the 1960s. It killed weeds by disrupting photosynthesis, but in humans, it triggered a cascade of destruction. Once ingested, paraquat was absorbed through the stomach and intestines, spreading rapidly to the lungs, where it caused irreversible scarring. The kidneys and liver would fail soon after, and there was no antidote. Treatment was limited to supportive measures like activated charcoal or hemodialysis, but these were rarely effective against large doses. A single tablespoon could be fatal, and the suffering was prolonged, with victims enduring days or weeks of pain before succumbing. In 1985, paraquat's accessibility made it an ideal weapon for a killer. Farmers could buy it in gallon jugs, and its use was so widespread that it accounted for 40% of pesticide-related deaths in Japan by 2002, even after reforms. The killer likely exploited this, purchasing or stealing paraquat and carefully mixing it into the beverages. The fact that one victim died from diquat, a similar herbicide, suggested either a mistake or an intentional variation, but it offered no meaningful leads. The police investigated agricultural suppliers and black market channels, but the trail went cold. As autumn turned to winter, the poisonings abruptly stopped. The last confirmed case was in late September or early October, though fear lingered long after. The sudden cessation was as mysterious as the crimes themselves. Had the killer grown bored? Moved on to another method? Been arrested for an unrelated crime? Theories abounded, but none could be substantiated. The police, frustrated by their lack of progress, began to explore the possibility of copycat crimes. In December 1985, containers of milk served in schools in Mie Prefecture were found to be tainted, though no one died. The incident bore eerie similarities to the vending machine poisonings, but it was never definitively linked. The paraquat murders left a lasting scar on Japan. The case exposed vulnerabilities in a society that prided itself on safety and trust. Vending machines, once a hallmark of convenience, became symbols of danger, and it would take years for public confidence to recover. Otsuka Pharmaceutical, battered by the scandal, tightened its production and distribution processes, and the government introduced stricter regulations on paraquat. By 1986, the herbicide was reformulated to be less toxic, though it remained a significant cause of poisoning deaths. Japan also began to rethink its approach to product tampering, implementing tamper-evident packaging and increasing surveillance around vending machines. The case also had a chilling echo in later years. In 1998, Japan faced another wave of drink poisonings, this time targeting vending machines and convenience stores. The similarities were uncanny, but no connection to the 1985 murders was ever established. More recently, in 2019, a paraquat poisoning in Akita Prefecture raised questions about whether the herbicide's legacy of death was still haunting the country. These incidents underscored the enduring danger of paraquat and the difficulty of preventing such crimes in an open society. For the families of the victims, the lack of closure was a wound that never healed. Takashi Sakai's colleagues remembered him as a dedicated executive, a man who had worked tirelessly to provide for his family. Haruo Odzu's death left his loved ones grappling with the senselessness of his loss, a man killed by a free drink he thought was a small stroke of luck. The 17-year-old girl from Saitama, barely beginning her life, became a symbol of the killer's indiscriminate cruelty. Each victim had a story, a life cut short by a faceless predator who vanished into the shadows. The police investigation, despite its scale, yielded no arrests, no suspects, no resolution. The case remains one of Japan's most infamous unsolved mysteries, a grim reminder of the limits of justice in the face of calculated evil. Over the years, theories have persisted: a disgruntled employee, a chemist with a grudge, a serial killer testing their methods. Some even speculated that sensational links to the 1982 Tylenol murders in Chicago, suggesting the paraquat murders were an attempt to replicate that horror on a larger scale. But without evidence, these remain conjectures, stories told to fill the void of the unknown. In the end, the paraquat murders are a tale of trust betrayed, of a society forced to confront its vulnerabilities, and of a killer who slipped through the cracks of justice. The vending machines still stand in Japan, their lights glowing in the night, but for those who remember 1985, they carry a shadow of fear. The case is a haunting chapter in true crime history, a story of random cruelty and unanswered questions that continues to captivate and terrify. Who was the paraquat killer? Why did they strike? And where did they go? These are the mysteries that linger, as elusive as the poison that claimed so many lives. In the quiet, residential neighborhood of Kamisoshigeya, nestled within Tokyo's sprawling Setagaya ward, the turn of the millennium was meant to be a time of celebration. The year 2000 was drawing to a close, and Japan was preparing for Amasoka, the cherished New Year's Eve tradition that symbolized renewal and hope. Families across the nation were tidying their homes, preparing festive meals, and looking forward to the promise of a new century. For the Miyazawa family, Mikio, Yasuko, Nina, and Rei, their modest duplex home near Sashigaya Park was a sanctuary of warmth and routine. But on the night of December 30th, 2000, an unimaginable horror descended upon their household, shattering the tranquility of their lives and leaving behind one of Japan's most perplexing and haunting unsolved mysteries. The Miyazawas were an ordinary family, their lives woven into the fabric of Setagaya's suburban calm. Mikio, 44, was a hard-working businessman employed at a British marketing firm, known for his dedication and quiet demeanor. His wife, Yasuko, 41, was a devoted mother and educator who ran a small tutoring business from their home, teaching local children with patience and care. Their daughter, Nina, 8 years old, was a bright and cheerful girl, full of energy and curiosity, while their 6-year-old son, Rei, was a gentle child, often described as the heart of the family. The family had moved into their Kamisoshigeya home in 1990, drawn to the area's burgeoning development and its promise of a peaceful place to raise their children. Their house, a 2-story structure, was part of a duplex shared with Yasuko's family, including her mother, Haruko, who lived in the adjacent unit. From the outside, the two homes appeared as one, their proximity fostering a close-knit bond between the families. By 2000, however, the neighborhood had begun to change. What was once a vibrant community of over 200 families had dwindled as the city planned to expand Sashigaya Park, a green space directly behind the Miyazawa home. Many residents had sold their properties and moved away, leaving only a handful of families, including the Miyazawas, in the area. The isolation of their home, bordered by the park and the Sengawa River, gave it an almost secluded feel, despite its location in one of Tokyo's largest wards. The Miyazawas, like their neighbors, had plans to relocate eventually, having already sold their land to the city. But for now, their home remained a place of comfort, filled with the laughter of children and the quiet routines of family life. On the evening of December 30th, 2000, the Miyazawas went about their day with no end of the tragedy that awaited. Mikio spent time on the family computer, perhaps catching up on work or browsing the internet, a common activity for the tech-savvy father. Yasuko and Nina relaxed together, likely watching television or chatting, while Rei, who had a history of health issues, was already asleep in his upstairs bedroom. The family had been spotted earlier that evening, around 6 p.m., at a nearby shopping center, possibly picking up last-minute items for the New Year celebrations. The air was festive, the neighborhood quiet, and the Miyazawa's home glowed with the warmth of a family preparing for the holiday. Sometime between 11:30 p.m. and midnight, an intruder entered the Miyazawa home, setting in motion a chain of events that would leave an indelible mark on Japanese history. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department, TMPD, in their subsequent investigation, pieced together a chilling timeline of the crime, relying on forensic evidence and the harrowing discoveries made the following morning. The intruder likely gained entry through the second-floor bathroom window at the rear of the house, which faced Sashigaya Park. Investigators found the window's fly screen cut and discarded on the ground outside, with muddy footprints suggesting the killer had climbed a tree or used the park's terrain to access the elevated window. The choice of entry was deliberate, exploiting the home's isolated position and the cover of darkness. The sequence of the murders was as brutal as it was methodical. The intruder first encountered Ray, the 6-year-old boy sleeping alone in his upstairs bedroom. In a silent, calculated act, the killer strangled Ray, ending his life without raising an immediate alarm. The noise, however, was enough to rouse Mikio, who was downstairs. Sensing something amiss, Mikio rushed to his son's aid, only to confront the intruder on the staircase. A ferocious struggle ensued. The assailant, armed with a sashimi knife he had brought with him, stabbed Mikio repeatedly. The attack was so violent that the knife's blade snapped, embedding a fragment in Mikio's head. Undeterred, the killer retrieved a kitchen knife from the Miyazawa's own kitchen and continued his assault, leaving Mikio's body crumpled at the base of the stairs. Yasuko and Nina, alerted by the commotion, attempted to flee or defend themselves, but the intruder pursued them. The two were found together, their bodies bearing the marks of a frenzied attack. Yasuko had been stabbed in the chest and head with such force that her bones were exposed, while Nina, the 8-year-old girl who had been watching television with her mother hours earlier, suffered similarly horrific wounds. The kitchen knife, taken from the family's own home, was left at the scene, its blade stained with the blood of its victims. The ferocity of the killing suggested a deep rage or a chilling detachment, as though the intruder took pleasure in the act of destruction. What followed was perhaps the most baffling aspect of the crime. Rather than fleeing the scene, the intruder remained in the Miyazawa home for several hours, behaving as though he were a guest rather than a murderer. He rummaged through the family's refrigerator, eating 4 melon-flavored ice cream bars and leaving the wrappers scattered on the kitchen counter. He drank barley tea from a bottle, leaving his DNA on the rim. He used the family's computer, accessing websites bookmarked by Mikio, including the page of the theatrical troupe, and left the mouse moved to a different position. In the bathroom, he left an unflushed toilet containing feces with traces of sesame seeds and string beans, suggesting a recent meal. He treated a minor injury, likely sustained during the struggle with Mikio, using 10 sanitary pads and a bandage from the family's supplies, which he discarded in the bathroom. Most strikingly, he napped on the family's sofa, leaving behind traces of his presence before finally departing in the early morning hours of December 31st. The intruder left a trail of physical evidence that should have made the case solvable. His clothing, a black Uniqlo jacket, a gray woven yarn hat with a black line, a scarf with a multicolored pattern, black gloves, a long-sleeved t-shirt, and white Slazenger sneakers made in South Korea, was abandoned at the scene. A fanny pack, containing trace amounts of sand, suggested he spent time outdoors, possibly near a beach or desert. A blue and white sweatshirt, later traced to a Chinese manufacturer and sold in only 4 Tokyo stores, was among the items left behind. Only 130 such sweatshirts had been sold, a tantalizing clue that seemed to promise a breakthrough. Bloodstains, fingerprints, and DNA were found throughout the house, with the blood type identified as A, distinct from the family's. The DNA analysis revealed a mixed heritage. The killer's father was likely of Asian descent, Japanese, Korean, or Chinese, while his mother was of Southern European origin, possibly from the Mediterranean or Adriatic region. This genetic profile, combined with the sand in the fanny pack, led some to speculate a connection to a foreign military base, such as those in South Korea or the United States, though no concrete evidence supported this theory. The discovery of the bodies came at 10:40 a.m. on December 31st, when Yasuko's mother, Haruko, grew concerned after receiving no response to her intercom calls. Using her spare key, Haruko entered the Miyazawa home and was met with a scene of unimaginable horror. Mikio lay at the foot of the stairs, his body riddled with stab wounds. Upstairs, she found Rei, strangled in his bed, and Yasuko and Nina, their bodies intertwined in a final, futile attempt to protect each other. Haruko's screams alerted the authorities, and the TMPD descended on the quiet neighborhood, transforming it into a crime scene that would captivate and confound Japan for decades. The investigation that followed was one of the largest in Japanese history, involving over 250,000 investigators and generating more than 12,000 tips from the public. Takeshi Tsuchida, the chief of Seiyo Police Station, was appointed to lead the effort, a role he would carry even into retirement. The TMPD meticulously cataloged the evidence left by the killer, from the blood-stained clothing to the ice cream wrappers. They traced the sweatshirt to its limited sales points, interviewed store employees, and distributed over 30,000 flyers featuring a Buddhist Jizo statue found near the Miyazawa home in April 2001, hoping it might be linked to the killer. A 20 million yen reward, the largest in Japanese history, was offered for information leading to an arrest, and police patrolled the neighborhood, hoping the killer might return to the scene. Despite the wealth of evidence, the case remained stubbornly unsolved. The TMPD explored multiple theories about the killer's motive. Robbery was considered, though the intruder stole only 150,000 yen, approximately $1,500, a paltry sum for such a violent crime. Some investigators believed the motive was personal, perhaps a grudge against Mikio, who had confronted noisy teenagers in Setagaya Park a week before the murders. Others speculated that Yasuko's tutoring business or Mikio's work might have drawn the ire of an acquaintance, though no evidence supported this. The killer's behavior, lingering in the house, eating, and napping, suggested a psychological complexity that baffled profilers. Was he a disorganized first-time offender, as his careless abandonment of evidence suggested, or a calculated psychopath who reveled in the aftermath of his crime? The DNA evidence, while detailed, proved frustratingly inconclusive. The mixed Asian and European ancestry pointed to a rare genetic profile in Japan, but without a match in the national database, it led nowhere. The sand in the fanny pack, initially thought to be from a military base in Nevada or South Korea, was too common to pinpoint a specific location. Eyewitness reports added to the mystery. A man matching the killer's description, aged 35 to 40, about 170 centimeters tall, was seen near Sengawa Station, a mile from the Miyazawa home, on December 30th. Another sighting, the day after the murders, placed a man with a deep arm wound at Tobuniko Station, 2 to 3 hours away, but the injury was deemed too severe to fit the killer's profile. A supermarket camera near Kichioji Station captured a man purchasing a sashimi knife, believed to be the murder weapon, but the footage was too grainy to identify him. The case took on a life of its own in Japanese society, becoming a cause célèbre that fueled public fascination and frustration. The sheer volume of evidence, DNA, fingerprints, clothing, made the lack of an arrest all the more perplexing. The murders prompted a national debate about the statute of limitations for murder, which was abolished in 2010, ensuring the killer could still face justice if caught. The Miyazawa home, preserved as a crime scene, became a somber landmark, surrounded by crime prevention lights and patrolled by police. In November 2023, 10 high school students broke into the property for a test of courage, prompting the TMPD to increase security and post new no trespassing signs. The incident underscored the case's enduring grip on the public imagination. For the Miyazawa family's surviving relatives, particularly Mikio's mother, Setsuko, the pain of loss was compounded by the absence of closure. Setsuko, who turned 93 in 2024, visited her family's grave in Niiza City, Saitama Prefecture, each year on the anniversary of the murders, praying for resolution. In 2024, frail health prevented her from attending, a poignant reminder of time's relentless march. Takeshi Tsuchida, now a special advisor to Soren no Kai, a victims advocacy group, joined the bereaved in pushing for expanded DNA analysis. In May 2024, the Setagaya Award Assembly passed a motion urging Tokyo to adopt advanced DNA techniques, such as genetic phenotyping, which could create a suspect sketch based on DNA traits. Tsuchida believed that extracting more information from the killer's DNA, beyond mere type matching, could bring investigators closer to an answer. The Setagaya family murders remain a wound in Japan's collective psyche, a reminder of the fragility of safety and the limits of justice. The killer, now likely in his 50s or 60s, has evaded capture for over 2 decades, his identity a shadow in a case overflowing with clues. The Miyazawa home, still standing, is a silent witness to the horror of that winter night, its walls holding secrets that have yet to be unlocked. For Setsuko, Haruko, and the countless investigators who have dedicated their lives to the case, the hope of resolution burns faintly but persistently. The 20 million yen reward still stands, flyers are still distributed at Saijo Station, and the TMPD continues its patrols, driven by a simple truth: this is a case that must be solved. In the quiet, Sundapple community of Fallbrook, California, known affectionately as the Friendly Village, the McStay family seem to embody the American dream. Joseph McStay, a 40-year-old entrepreneur, ran Earth-inspired products, a business specializing in decorative indoor water fountains. His wife, Summer, 43, a licensed real estate agent, cared for their 2 young sons, 4-year-old Johnny and 3-year-old Joseph Jr., known as Joey. The family had recently moved into a spacious, 5-story stucco home in late 2009, eager for a fresh start in a peaceful neighborhood. Their home was a work in progress, with fresh paint on the walls, blue painter's tape along the edges, and newspaper covering the floors. Bowls of popcorn sat on the couch, a testament to cozy family evenings. 2 beloved dogs roamed the backyard, and the McStays were planning Joey's upcoming birthday party. Life, by all accounts, was good until February 4th, 2010, when the family vanished without a trace, setting off a mystery that would captivate the nation and unravel into a chilling tale of betrayal and brutality. That Thursday began like any other. Joseph spoke with his father, Patrick McStay, over the phone, mentioning he was rushing to a lunch meeting. Summer, whose real name was Virginia Lisa Aranda but who also went by Summer Martelli, spent the day at home, tending to the children and overseeing renovations. She chatted with her sister, who had recently given birth, sharing the small joys of family life. Joseph's business was thriving, with a potential deal worth millions on the horizon. Around noon, he met with Charles Chase Merritt, a 52-year-old welder and business associate who crafted custom waterfalls for Joseph's company. The two had known each other since 2007, their professional relationship blossoming into a friendship that included paintball outings and shared dinners. Joseph considered Chase one of his closest confidants, unaware that this lunch in Rancho Cucamonga, about an hour from Fallbrook, would be his last known sighting. By 5:47 p.m., all communication from the McStay family ceased. Joseph's phone went silent after a call to Chase at 8:28 p.m., which went to voicemail. Chase later told police he ignored the call, claiming he was tired and watching a movie with his girlfriend. The call pinged a cell tower in Fallbrook, placing Joseph near home. Summer's phone showed no activity after her afternoon call with her sister. The family's white 1996 Isuzu Trooper, captured on a neighbor's surveillance camera at 7:47 p.m., rolled out of their driveway, its occupants obscured in the grainy footage. The vehicle's departure marked the last tangible trace of the McStays in Fallbrook, leaving behind a home that seemed frozen in time. Days passed with no word from Joseph, Summer, or the boys. Relatives grew concerned. Joseph's brother, Michael McStay, hesitated to act, hoping the family might be on an impromptu vacation. But by February 13th, urged by their father Patrick's growing unease, Michael drove to the Fallbrook home. Finding the doors locked, he climbed through an open window at the back. Inside, the house told a story of sudden departure. A carton of eggs sat on the kitchen counter, rotting alongside bananas. 2 child-sized bowls of popcorn rested on the living room couch, untouched. The family's 2 dogs, Bear and Digger, were in the backyard, without food or water, an oddity for a family so devoted to their pets. Summer's prescription sunglasses, essential for her daily life, lay abandoned. Joseph's asthma medication, which he never left behind, was still in the house. Michael's heart sank. Something was terribly wrong. On February 15th, Michael reported the family missing to the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. Deputies arrived, securing a search warrant by February 19th. The search revealed no signs of a struggle, no blood, no broken furniture, no forced entry. Yet the scene suggested haste, as if the family had left intending to return. Investigators combed through phone records, financial statements, and computer activity. They discovered a January 2010 search on the family's home computer for "What documents do children need for traveling to Mexico?" and evidence of Summer exploring Spanish language lessons in December 2009. These findings pointed south, especially when, on February 8th, the McStay's Isuzu Trooper was found abandoned in a San Isidro parking lot, just steps from the U.S.-Mexico border. The vehicle, towed as an abandoned car, contained no obvious clues but was sent for forensic analysis. The Mexico theory gained traction when authorities reviewed border surveillance footage from February 8th, around 7 p.m. The grainy video showed 4 figures, 2 adults and 2 children, crossing on foot into Mexico at the San Isidro pedestrian gate. To investigators, they resembled the McStays. On February 23rd, the San Diego Sheriff's Department notified Interpol, asking them to watch for the family south of the border. Flyers with the McStays' photos circulated, and the FBI joined the case in April 2010. Yet the family's relatives were skeptical. Patrick McStay, who had meticulously reviewed his son's emails for clues, insisted the border footage wasn't them. Summer, he said, feared Mexico due to the ongoing drug wars and would never take her young children there. Susan Blake, Joseph's mother, agreed, noting that the adult male's gait didn't match her son's. The family's bank accounts, holding over $100,000, showed no withdrawals before or after their disappearance, undermining the idea of a planned trip. For 3.5 years, the case remained a baffling mystery. Theories proliferated. Some speculated the McStays had fled to start anew, perhaps overwhelmed by financial or personal pressures. Others, including radio host Rick Baker, who wrote a book titled No Goodbyes, The Mysterious Disappearance of the McStay Family, suggested darker possibilities, even implicating Summer in the family's fate. Sightings of the family were reported as far afield as Indiana, Montana, and Baja California, fueling hope they were alive. Patrick McStay, however, harbored a grim intuition from the start. "I just knew," he later said, tears in his eyes. "I was never going to see them again." The truth began to surface on November 11, 2013, when an off-road motorcyclist riding near Victorville, California, about 100 miles north of Fallbrook, stumbled across a child's skull in the Mojave Desert. The discovery, near Interstate 15, prompted a swift response from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. Excavations revealed 2 shallow graves, each containing the remains of an adult and a child. A 3-pound sledgehammer, rusted but intact, lay nearby, along with clothing speckled with white paint, the same color used in the McStay's home renovations. Dental records confirmed the remains belonged to Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joey. An autopsy delivered a harrowing verdict. All 4 had died from blunt force trauma, their skulls and jaws shattered. Johnny, just 4 years old, had been struck at least 7 times. Joseph's remains were found with an extension cord around his neck, wrapped in a white towel and secured with a tie-down strap. The family, authorities believed, had been killed in their Fallbrook home and transported to the desert for burial. The discovery silenced theories of a voluntary disappearance. The McStays hadn't fled to Mexico, they had been brutally murdered. The San Bernardino Sheriff's Department took over, declaring the deaths homicides. The sledgehammer was identified as the likely murder weapon, and the paint on the clothing suggested the killings occurred during the home renovations. Yet the lack of blood or physical evidence in the Fallbrook home puzzled investigators. How had a family of 4 been killed and removed without leaving a trace? The case, now a quadruple homicide, demanded answers, and suspicion turned to those closest to the McStays. Charles Chase Merritt emerged as a person of interest. Joseph's business partner and self-proclaimed best friend, Chase had been the last to see Joseph alive during their February 4th lunch meeting. His account of ignoring Joseph's 8:28 p.m. call raised eyebrows, but it was his financial dealings with Joseph that drew scrutiny. Prosecutors later revealed that Joseph had accused Chase of shoddy work and pilfering money, claiming Chase owed him over $42,000. In the days following the McStay's disappearance, checks totaling thousands of dollars, allegedly from Joseph to Chase, were backdated to February 4th and cashed. Chase's DNA was found on the steering wheel and gearshift of the Isuzu Trooper, despite his claim that he had never driven it. Most damning, cell tower data placed Chase's phone near the McStay home on February 4th and near the Victorville burial site on February 6th, suggesting he had been at both the crime scene and the graves. On November 7, 2014, nearly a year after the bodies were found, authorities arrested Chase Merritt in Chatsworth, California. He was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. San Bernardino County District Attorney Michael Ramos called the killings cold and callous, vowing justice for the McStay family. Chase, then 57, maintained his innocence, insisting Joseph was his best friend. "I would never hurt him, never hurt Summer, Johnny, or Joseph Jr., he told CNN in a 2014 interview before his arrest. He claimed Joseph's call on February 4th came while he was with his girlfriend, and he regretted not answering, believing the killings were random. Yet the evidence painted a different picture, one of greed and betrayal. The trial began on January 7, 2019, in San Bernardino Superior Court, presided over by Judge Michael A. Smith. It was a grueling affair, spanning over 6 months and featuring more than 50 days of testimony. Prosecutors argued that Chase's motive was financial. Joseph, frustrated with Chase's work and debts, had planned to cut him out of the business, threatening Chase's livelihood. The prosecution presented a web of circumstantial evidence, the backdated checks, the DNA in the trooper, and the cell phone pings. They alleged Chase bludgeoned the family with a sledgehammer in their Fallbrook home, likely striking Joseph first from behind, then killing Summer and the children to eliminate witnesses. The bodies were then transported to the desert, buried in shallow graves with the murder weapon discarded nearby. The defense, led by attorney Rajan Nalim, countered that the case lacked physical evidence tying Chase to the murders. No blood or DNA linked him to the Fallbrook home or the desert graves. They suggested other suspects, including a business associate named Dan Kavanaugh, who had managed Joseph's company website and later sold the business. The defense also pointed to Michael McStay, Joseph's brother, noting his delay in reporting the disappearance and his access to the house. A bombshell witness claimed another individual had confessed to the murders, but the judge found no credible evidence to support alternative suspects. Chase's girlfriend provided an alibi, placing him with her on February 4th, though prosecutors discredited her testimony. Jurors deliberated for a week, grappling with the absence of direct physical evidence. On June 10, 2019, they delivered their verdict, guilty on all 4 counts of first-degree murder. The penalty phase followed, with prosecutors seeking the death penalty. Emotional victim impact statements poured forth. Susan Blake called Chase a despicable, evil monster. Michael McStay, addressing his brother's killer, declared, "You guys are cowards." Chase, unyielding, read a statement proclaiming his innocence. "I love Joseph," he said, his voice trembling. "I would never have raised my hand for a woman or child. I did not do this thing." His daughter, Taylor Jarvis, vowed to prove his innocence, but the jury recommended death. On January 21, 2020, Judge Smith sentenced Charles Chase Merritt, now 62, to death for the murders of Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joey McStay. The courtroom, packed with the McStay's loved ones, erupted in quiet relief. Chase showed no emotion, his defense team decrying the verdict as a miscarriage of justice. He was transferred to San Quentin State Prison, where California's death row inmates await execution, though the state has not carried out a death sentence since 2006. The defense vowed to appeal, citing the circumstantial nature of the evidence, but for the McStay's family, the sentence offered a measure of closure after a decade of anguish. The McStay family murders remain a haunting chapter in true crime, a story of a family's dreams shattered by violence. The case, chronicled in documentaries like Investigation Discovery's Two Shallow Graves and books by authors like Caitlin Rother, continues to spark debate. Some, like Reddit users who watch the docuseries, question whether Chase acted alone or if others were involved, citing the logistical challenge of killing and burying 4 people without leaving evidence in the home. Others point to the circumstantial evidence, compelling but not airtight, as cause for doubt. Yet the prosecution's narrative, built on Chase's financial motive and incriminating movements, convinced a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. For Patrick McStay, Susan Blake, and Michael McStay, the loss is immeasurable. Joseph, with his entrepreneurial spirit, and Summer, with her devotion to her boys, were stolen from them, along with 2 children whose lives had barely begun. The Mojave Desert, with its vast, unforgiving expanse, holds the final resting place of a family that once laughed and loved in Fallbrook. The sledgehammer, the shallow graves, the paint-speckled clothing, these grim relics tell a story of betrayal by someone they trusted. As Chase Merritt sits on death row, the McStay's loved ones cling to the hope that justice, both earthly and divine, has been served. In the quiet of the friendly village, the memory of Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joey endures, a reminder of a family lost but never forgotten. In the rugged expanse of Desetsuza National Park, where Hokkaido's towering peaks pierce the sky and dense forests cloak the land in mystery, a chilling tale unfolded in the summer of 1989. Mount Asahidake, the highest peak in this pristine wilderness, is a magnet for adventurers seeking to conquer its snow-dusted slopes and marvel at its breathtaking vistas. But beneath its serene beauty lies a story of desperation, survival, and unanswered questions, a story that began with a cryptic distress signal and ended with a haunting discovery. This is the story of the Mount Asahidake SOS incident, a case that has puzzled investigators, captivated the public, and left an indelible mark on the annals of true crime. It was July 24, 1989, a warm summer day in Hokkaido, Japan's northernmost island. The air was thick with the scent of pine and the distant hum of insects as 2 mountaineers from Tokyo set out to climb Mount Asahidake. The pair, experienced hikers in their 30s, were drawn to the challenge of the mountain's steep trails and the promise of panoramic views from its summit. They followed the well-trodden path from Mount Kuradake, a neighboring peak, toward Asahidake, their backpacks laden with supplies for a day's journey. The route was demanding but familiar to seasoned climbers, marked by rocky outcrops and guideposts like the Kinko IWA, a massive square rock nicknamed Safe Rock for its distinctive shape. Yet, nearby lurked a deceptive twin, Denise Kinko IWA, or Fake Safe Rock, a perilous ledge that had led many astray. Unbeknownst to the hikers, this subtle misstep would set the stage for a chain of events that would reverberate for decades. As the day wore on, the hikers veered off course, descending south toward the Chubetsa River instead of ascending toward Asahidake's summit. The terrain grew treacherous, with dense sasa groves, bamboo-like grass that grew sideways, tangling feet and obscuring paths. By late afternoon, the men realized they were lost, far from the trail they had intended to follow. Panic set in as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the unforgiving landscape. They had no way of knowing that their plight would soon intersect with a mystery far greater than their own. Back in civilization, concern mounted when the hikers failed to return. Friends alerted the Hokkaido police, who sprang into action, dispatching a search helicopter to scour the vast expanse of Disappearance National Park. The chopper buzzed over the rugged terrain, its crew scanning the sea of green below for any sign of the missing men. Hours passed with no luck until, just as hope began to fade, the pilots spotted something extraordinary, a massive SOS sign, crafted from birch logs, sprawled across a clearing near the Chubetsu River. Each letter was enormous, measuring nearly 16 feet long, formed by 19 felled trees stacked 3 high. The sign was a beacon of desperation, unmistakable from the air, and it seemed to promise salvation for the lost hikers. The helicopter circled the area, and within minutes, the crew located the 2 Tokyo mountaineers, alive but disoriented, about 2 to 3 kilometers north of the sign. They were exhausted, their faces etched with relief as the rescue team hoisted them to safety. The police assumed the hikers had constructed the SOS sign, a testament to their ingenuity and will to survive. But when the men were debriefed at a nearby hospital, their response stunned the officers. They had no knowledge of the sign. They hadn't built it, hadn't seen it, and had no idea who had. The revelation sent a chill through the rescue team. If the hikers hadn't created the SOS, who had? And why was it there, in the middle of nowhere, on a mountain known for its beauty but also its dangers? The Hokkaido police, now faced with a deepening mystery, returned to the site the following day, July 25, 1989. The helicopter hovered over the SOS sign once more, its rotors slicing through the morning mist. This time, the search was not for living hikers but for clues to the sign's origin. As the team descended into the clearing, they noticed the terrain's unforgiving nature. The area was hemmed in by a dense sausage grove, its thick, horizontal stalks making movement nearly impossible. A steep cliff loomed nearby, its jagged edge a stark reminder of the mountain's perils. The SOS sign itself was a marvel of effort, its construction estimated to have taken 2 days of grueling labor. The birch logs, each 5 meters long, had been carefully arranged, but no tools, no axes, no saws were found nearby. The absence of cutting implements raised a nagging question: how had the trees been felled? As the police combed the area, their search yielded a grim discovery. Near the SOS sign, scattered among the underbrush, were fragments of human bones. The remains were weathered, bearing the marks of animal bites, and some showed signs of fractures that suggested injury before death. The bones were collected and sent to Asahidake Medical University for analysis, where they were initially identified as belonging to a woman aged 20 to 40. The find was unsettling, but it was only the beginning. In a nearby hollow, just large enough to shelter a single person, the police uncovered a cache of personal belongings stuffed into the roots of a tree. The items were a time capsule of a life cut short, a backpack, a tripod, a pair of men's basketball shoes, 2 cameras, a notebook for cassette tapes, a tape recorder, and a driver's license. The license belonged to Kenji Iwamura, a 25-year-old office worker from Konan, Aichi Prefecture, who had vanished without a trace 5 years earlier. Kenji Iwamura's story was one of quiet ambition and unspoken dreams. Born in 1959, he was a reserved but friendly young man, known to his classmates as otaku, a term for someone deeply passionate about niche hobbies like anime and technology. He was a member of his university's computer club and had a habit of recording anime theme songs off the television, a quirk that endeared him to his friends. In July 1984, at the age of 25, Kenji told his family he was heading to Hokkaido for a hiking trip to Mount Asahidake. He checked into a local lodge, informing the owner of his plans for a quick climb. But when he failed to check out and left his belongings behind, the lodge owner grew worried. Kenji's parents, alarmed by his absence from work, contacted the police, who launched a search. Despite their efforts, no trace of Kenji was found, and his disappearance became a cold case, a lingering wound for his family. Now, 5 years later, Kenji's name resurfaced in the most unexpected way. The items found in the tree hollow were unmistakably his. The basketball shoes matched the size he wore, and an acquaintance confirmed that Kenji often carried a tape recorder with anime songs, including themes from Macross and Magical Princess Minky Momo. One of the cassette tapes even had a cutout of Minky Momo artwork as its case, a detail that tied it directly to Kenji's passions. But it was the contents of the tapes that sent shockwaves through the investigation. On July 27, 1989, the police played the recordings, and what they heard was a voice from beyond the grave, a man's voice, trembling with fear and desperation, crying out for help. "SOS, help me. I can't move on the cliff. SOS, help me. The place is where I first met the helicopter. The Sasa is deep, and I can't get up. Lift me up from here." The voice was raw, its tone laced with panic, as if the speaker believed rescue was imminent. The words painted a vivid picture of a man trapped on a cliff, surrounded by dense Sasa, unable to escape. The mention of a helicopter suggested he had seen or heard one, perhaps during a routine patrol or an earlier search. The other tapes contained music from Macross and Magical Princess Minky Momo, reinforcing the connection to Kenji. The recording was chilling, not only for its content but for its timing. If Kenji had gone missing in 1984, how had he survived long enough to create such a sign and leave such a message? And why was the tape found near bones initially identified as female? The discovery of the tape and belongings sparked a media frenzy. Japanese television networks descended on Hokkaido, their cameras capturing the eerie SOS sign and the desolate landscape where it lay. Reporters speculated wildly, some suggesting Kenji had been stranded for years, others proposing darker theories of foul play. The public was captivated by the mystery, and the story spread beyond Japan, becoming a global curiosity. On July 30th, 1989, 5 days into the investigation, a journalist from the Hokkaido Broadcasting Company, HBC, made another startling find. While exploring the area near the SOS sign, he noticed a tree with a hollowed-out base. Inside, he found additional items, 2 more cameras, another notebook, and a second copy of Kenji Iwamura's driver's license. The discovery deepened the enigma. Why had Kenji's belongings been scattered in 2 separate locations? Had he been moving them, or had someone else? The police pieced together a tentative timeline. Kenji had set out to hike Mount Asahidake on July 10, 1984. He likely followed the same route as the Tokyo hikers, passing the safe rock but mistaking the fake safe rock for his guidepost. A misstep could have sent him tumbling into the Sasa Grove below, a treacherous area where the sideways growing grass made climbing back up nearly impossible. The cliff mentioned in the tape was likely nearby, its steep drop a trap from which escape was difficult. The Japan Forestry Agency and the Japan Geographical Authority provided a crucial clue. Aerial photographs taken on September 20th, 1987, showed the SOS sign already in place, meaning it had been constructed at least 2 years before the 1989 rescue. This suggested Kenji had survived for some time after his disappearance, long enough to build the sign and record his plea. But the question of the sign's construction remained a puzzle. The birch logs were heavy, each requiring significant strength to move. The police estimated it would have taken 2 days of intense labor to create the sign, a feat that seemed daunting for a single person, especially one injured or weakened. No cutting tools were found, yet the trees appeared to have been felled and arranged with precision. Some speculated that Kenji had used his hands or improvised tools, but the absence of any such implements cast doubt on this theory. Others wondered if he had helped, but no evidence of another person was found, except for the bones initially identified as female. The misidentification of the bones added another layer of confusion. Sent to Asahidake Medical University, the remains were first thought to belong to a woman based on their size and structure. This led investigators to hypothesize that 2 people, a man and a woman, had been involved in the incident. But a later reassessment, prompted by the discovery of Kenji's belongings, revealed a critical error. The bones were re-examined, and forensic experts determined they were male, with blood type A, matching Kenji's profile. The fractures suggested he had suffered a fall or other trauma, possibly from the cliff he described in the tape. The animal bites indicated his body had been exposed for years, scavenged by wildlife in the remote wilderness. With this correction, the police concluded that the remains were almost certainly Kenji's, though questions lingered about the initial mistake. The tape recording itself was a source of endless fascination. Kenji's voice, captured in a moment of terror, spoke of a cliff and a helicopter, yet his body and belongings were found on lower ground, near the SOS sign, not a cliff. Some theorized he had recorded the message while trapped, then managed to move to the clearing before succumbing to his injuries. Others suggested the tape had been inadvertently switched on, capturing his cries without intent. The mention of a helicopter was particularly haunting. Had Kenji seen a search chopper in 1984 when his parents first reported him missing? Or had he mistaken a routine flight for a rescue mission? The Sasa Grove and cliff he described matched the terrain, but the timeline was murky. If he had survived until at least 1987, when the SOS sign was visible in aerial photos, how had he sustained himself for 3 years in such a harsh environment? The police explored every angle, but the case defied easy answers. Kenji's belongings offered few clues. The cameras contained no usable film, their contents degraded by time and exposure. The notebook was weathered, its pages illegible. The amulets found in the hollow suggested Kenji had carried tokens of protection, perhaps a nod to his cautious nature. His backpack and tripod hinted at a planned hike, but nothing explained why he had stuffed his possessions into a tree root. Had he been hiding them, fearing discovery? Or was he simply delirious, his mind unraveling as hypothermia or starvation set in? The absence of clothing on or near the remains raised further questions. In hypothermia cases, victims sometimes paradoxically undress, a phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing. Was this what happened to Kenji, or had his clothes been scattered by animals? Theories abounded, each more speculative than the last. Some suggested Kenji had been injured in a fall, perhaps breaking a leg, and had built the SOS sign in a desperate bid for rescue. The tape, they argued, was his final act, a cry for help recorded as he clung to hope. Others proposed a darker scenario, that Kenji had not been alone, and the SOS sign was the work of an unknown companion who vanished without a trace. The initial misidentification of the bones fueled this idea, with some clinging to the notion of a second victim. Yet no other missing persons matched the timeline or location, and the corrected forensic analysis pointed solely to Kenji. A few even whispered of supernatural forces, citing the eerie coincidence of the sign saving 2 hikers years after its creation. But the police dismissed such ideas, focusing on the tangible evidence. The Hokkaido police closed the case within a week, a decision that struck many as hasty. They concluded that Kenji Iwamura had died in 1984 or shortly after, a victim of the mountain's harsh conditions. The SOS sign, they believed, was his creation, a testament to his determination to be found. The tape was his final message, recorded in a moment of despair. The bones, now identified as his, confirmed his fate. Yet the lack of tools, the misidentified remains, and the sheer effort required to build the sign left gaps in the story. Why had the police rushed to a conclusion? Were they eager to quell the media storm, or did they simply lack the resources to probe further? For Kenji's family, the answers brought little closure. Their son was gone, his final days marked by suffering and solitude. The Mount Asahidake SOS incident remains one of Japan's most enduring mysteries. It is a story of human resilience, of a young man who, faced with impossible odds, built a monument to his will to survive. The SOS sign, visible from the sky, was a silent plea that went unanswered in Kenji's lifetime but saved 2 others by a stroke of fate. It is also a story of unanswered questions, of a tape that captured a voice but not the full truth, of bones that told a partial story, and of a sign that stood as a beacon of hope and a riddle without a solution. For those who visit Disappearance National Park today, the mountain's beauty is tempered by its secrets. The SOS sign is gone, dismantled by time or human hands, but its legacy endures. Kenji Iwamura's desperate cry echoes in the wind, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit fights to be heard. In the spring of 2014, 2 young women from the Netherlands, Kris and Lisanne, embarked on what was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime. Their journey to Panama was filled with dreams of cultural immersion, volunteer work, and exploration of a vibrant, tropical landscape. Instead, it became one of the most haunting and perplexing mysteries in modern true crime history. The disappearance and deaths of Kris and Lisanne in the dense jungles near Boquete, Panama, remain shrouded in unanswered questions, with chilling clues that continue to baffle investigators and captivate the public. This is the story of their ill-fated trip, the desperate search that followed, and the eerie discoveries that have fueled endless speculation. Kris, 21, and Lisanne, 22, were close friends who had known each other for years, growing up in the picturesque city of Amersfoort in the Netherlands. Kris, with her open and creative spirit, had recently completed her studies in cultural social education, specializing in art education at the University of Utrecht. Lisanne, described as optimistic, intelligent, and an avid volleyball player, had graduated with a degree in applied psychology from Deventer. The 2 shared a dorm room in Amersfoort, worked together at a cozy cafe called Den Klein and Hap, and dreamed of seeing the world. For 6 months, they saved diligently to fund a 6-week trip to Panama, a destination they chose for its rich culture, natural beauty, and opportunities to volunteer. The trip was not just a vacation but a meaningful endeavor, a chance to learn Spanish, work with local children, and celebrate Lisanne's recent graduation. On March 15, 2014, Kris and Lisanne arrived in Panama, their hearts brimming with excitement. For the first 2 weeks, they explored the coastal town of Bocas del Toro, soaking up the sun, savoring new foods, and meeting fellow travelers, including 2 Dutch men with whom they shared meals and laughter. Kris's diary entries from this time painted a picture of joy and discovery, capturing the thrill of their adventure. The pair's enthusiasm was infectious, and they regularly texted their families back home, sharing updates about their experiences. By March 29th, they were ready for the next chapter of their journey. They traveled to Boquete, a charming mountain town in Chiriquí province, nestled near the Baru volcano. Boquete was known for its lush forests, coffee plantations, and hiking trails, making it a haven for nature lovers. Kris and Lisanne moved in with a local host family, eager to begin their volunteer work at a nearby school. Their plan was to spend 4 weeks in Boquete, teaching arts and crafts to children and improving their Spanish. However, when they arrived at the school, they were met with an unexpected setback. There was no place for them to volunteer. The school had not been properly informed, and the opportunity they had been counting on fell through. Disappointed but undeterred, Kris and Lisanne decided to make the most of their time in Boquete. They explored the town, visited local attractions, and planned short excursions to fill their days. One such outing was a hike on the El Pianista Trail, a scenic path that wound through the cloud forests surrounding the Baru volcano. The trail was popular among tourists, known for its breathtaking views and moderate difficulty, making it an appealing choice for the adventurous pair. On the morning of April 1st, 2014, Kris and Lisanne set out for the El Pianista Trail around 11 a.m. They were in high spirits, accompanied by Azul, a dog belonging to their host family or, according to some accounts, the owners of a nearby restaurant called El Pianista. The women carried minimal supplies, expecting to spend only a few hours hiking. Lisanne had her Canon camera, which she used to document their journey, while their phones, Kris's iPhone 4 and Lisanne's Samsung Galaxy S3, were tucked away in their backpacks. They posted on Facebook about their intention to walk around Bouquet, and some reports suggest they were seen having brunch with two Dutch men earlier that day. As they waved goodbye to their host family and headed toward the trailhead, no one could have imagined that this would be the last time they were seen alive. The El Pianista Trail began innocently enough, with well-trodden paths and stunning vistas of the Continental Divide. Kris and Lisanne snapped photos as they ascended, capturing selfies and scenic shots of the lush greenery. One image showed Lisanne smiling at the camera, the jungle stretching out behind her, while another captured Kris crossing a small stream, her red hair glinting in the sunlight. The photos suggested they were enjoying themselves, moving confidently through the trail. But at some point, they ventured beyond the trail's summit, descending the northern side of the Continental Divide into a less traveled area. This decision, whether intentional or accidental, would prove catastrophic. The northern side of the trail was far wilder, with dense jungle, steep ravines, and treacherous riverbeds. Unlike the developed southern side, where Bouquet civilization was close at hand, the north led deeper into untamed wilderness. By the evening of April 1st, concern began to mount. Azul returned home alone, without Kris or Lisanne. The host family searched the area near their home but found no sign of the women. They decided to wait until morning to alert authorities, hoping the pair had simply gotten delayed. Meanwhile, Kris and Lisanne's parents, who were used to receiving daily texts, grew worried when they heard nothing from their daughters. On April 2nd, the women missed a scheduled appointment with a local tour guide named Feliciano, who was meant to take them on a private walking tour of Bouquet. This was the final straw. The host family contacted the authorities, and the National System of Civil Protection was informed. However, the initial response was frustratingly slow. The agency did not take the report seriously, delaying serious action for nearly 4 days. By April 3rd, local volunteers organized aerial and ground searches along the El Pianista Trail, combing the forests and lightly wooded areas around Bouquet. The searches yielded no clues, and the mystery deepened. On April 6th, with the women still missing, their parents arrived in Panama, accompanied by Dutch detectives and search and rescue teams. The families offered a $30,000 reward for information leading to Kris and Lisanne's whereabouts, and a full-scale search was launched, involving police, dog units, and helicopters. For 10 days, the forests were scoured, but the rugged terrain and dense vegetation made progress difficult. The lack of leads was agonizing for the families, who clung to hope that the women were still alive, perhaps injured or lost but recoverable. The first significant break in the case came 10 weeks later, on June 14, 2014. A local woman from the Ngabe community in Alto Romero, a village in Bocas del Toro province, found a blue backpack near a riverbank along the Culebra River, about 14 kilometers north of the El Pianista Trail. She turned it into authorities, and its contents were staggering. The backpack, later identified as Lisanne's, was in surprisingly good condition despite being exposed to the elements. Inside were 2 pairs of sunglasses, $88 in cash, Lisanne's insurance card, a water bottle, 2 bras, Kris's iPhone 4, Lisanne's Samsung Galaxy S3, and Lisanne's Canon camera. The discovery was a turning point, offering the first tangible evidence of the women's fate, but it also raised more questions than answers. Investigators examined the phones first. The logs revealed a chilling timeline. On April 1st, around 4:39 p.m., approximately 6 hours into their hike, someone attempted to call 112, the international emergency number used in Panama, from Kris's iPhone. 12 minutes later, at 4:51 p.m., another call was made to 911, Panama's national emergency number, from Lisanne's Samsung. Neither call connected due to poor reception in the jungle. Over the next few days, multiple call attempts were made from both phones, all unsuccessful. By April 4th, Lisanne's phone battery died after 5 a.m., and it was never used again. Kris's iPhone, however, was turned on intermittently between April 5th and April 11th, often without the correct PIN code being entered, suggesting someone was checking for a signal but unable to access the phone's full functions. The final attempt to power on the iPhone was on April 11th, after which it went silent. The Canon camera provided even more haunting insights. It contained over 100 photos, divided into 2 distinct sets. The first set, taken on April 1st, showed Kris and Lisanne hiking, smiling, and exploring. These daytime photos, numbering about 10, depicted a seemingly normal hike, with no immediate signs of distress. They included shots at the summit of the El Pianista Trail and beyond, confirming that the women had ventured onto the northern side of the Continental Divide. The second set, however, was far more unsettling. 90 photos were taken between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. on April 8th, 7 days after their disappearance, in near complete darkness, deep in the jungle. Most of these images were blurry, capturing only flashes of light against the black backdrop of the night. Some showed specific objects: a twig with plastic bags tied to it, placed on a rock, a backpack strap and a mirror on another rock, and, most disturbingly, the back of Kris's head, her red hair visible against what appeared to be bedrock. One photo appeared to show a pool of blood near her head, though its authenticity and context remained debated. Adding to the mystery, one photo was missing from the camera's sequence. The images were numbered sequentially, starting at 499, but number 509 was absent, deleted from the camera. Authorities were unable to recover it, leading speculation about what it might have contained. Was it intentionally deleted to hide something, or was it an error? The nighttime photos suggested a desperate situation. Perhaps Lisanne, or Kris, was using the camera's flash to signal for help, mark their location, or document their surroundings. The images of makeshift markers, like the twig and plastic bags, hinted at an attempt to navigate or leave signs for rescuers. The photo of Kris's head raised chilling possibilities. Was she injured, unconscious, or worse? The lack of clear context made these images both vital clues and maddeningly ambiguous. The discovery of the backpack prompted new searches along the Culebra River. In August 2014, searchers found Kris's denim shorts, zipped and neatly folded, on a rock a few kilometers from the backpack's location. Some accounts, however, claim the shorts were found in a river eddy, contradicting the neatly folded narrative. 2 months later, a pelvis bone and a hiking boot containing a human foot were discovered nearby. DNA testing confirmed they belonged to Lisanne. Over the following weeks, more than 30 bone fragments were found scattered along the riverbank, with 28 identified as Lisanne's and 2 as Kris's. 3 additional bone fragments belonged to unidentified individuals, adding another layer of intrigue. Lisanne's remains showed traces of flesh, consistent with natural decomposition, while Kris's bones appeared stark white, as if bleached, raising questions about their condition. Forensic analysis of the remains provided little clarity. Lisanne's foot showed signs of damage consistent with a fall, such as bone spurs, but the cause of death could not be determined. The bleaching of Kris's bones was particularly puzzling. Some speculated it was due to environmental factors, like exposure to sunlight or river chemicals, while others wondered if it suggested foul play. The scattered nature of the remains and the presence of unidentified bones fueled theories of human intervention, but no definitive evidence supported this. Panamanian authorities faced criticism for their handling of the case, with allegations of mismanagement and a rush to close the investigation to protect Panama's tourism industry. In 2017, further inquiries raised questions about possible links to other murders in the area, but no concrete connections were established. Theories about what happened to Kris and Lisanne abound, each grappling with the sparse and cryptic evidence. The most widely accepted explanation is that the women became lost after venturing off the main trail. Disoriented and unprepared for the jungle's harsh conditions, they may have fallen into a ravine or been swept away by a river during the onset of the wet season. The emergency calls and nighttime photos suggest they survived for at least a week, possibly with one or both injured. Lisanne, whose phone died first, may have used Kris's iPhone, explaining the incorrect pin attempts. The nighttime photos could reflect a desperate attempt to signal for help or document their location, with the photo of Kris's head indicating she was incapacitated or deceased. The backpack and remains, found downstream, align with the theory that their bodies were carried by the river, explaining their scattered state. However, this lost hiker theory struggles to account for certain details. The backpack's pristine condition, found 70 days after their disappearance, raised suspicions. Why was it in such good shape, and how did it end up so far from the trail? The neatly folded shorts, if true, seemed out of place in a survival scenario. The deleted photo and the bleached bones added to the unease, with some suggesting they pointed to human interference. Theories of foul play emerged, ranging from an attack by locals or predators to a connection with criminal activity in the area. One unverified claim, shared on Reddit, alleged that a gang lured the women to a party and killed them after a dispute, but no evidence substantiated this. The presence of unidentified bones and reports of a cleanly severed foot, though not officially confirmed, further fueled speculation of murder. Another theory posits a tragic accident, such as a fall from a monkey bridge, a precarious wire crossing common in the jungle. Some believe Kris fell, sustaining a fatal injury, and Lisanne stayed with her, using the camera to document their plight. Lisanne, weakened by hunger and exhaustion, may have later fallen or succumbed to the elements. The nighttime photos, with their makeshift markers, could reflect her attempt to navigate or signal for help. Yet, the absence of clear trauma in the remains and the mystery of the deleted photo complicate this narrative. Some even speculated about supernatural or animal involvement, though no signs of animal predation were noted. The families of Kris and Lisanne endured unimaginable pain throughout the ordeal. The discovery of the backpack and remains confirmed their worst fears, but the lack of answers compounded their grief. Lisanne's family leaned toward the accident theory, finding solace in the belief that the women died in a natural setting rather than at the hands of others. Kris's family, while devastated, sought to honor her memory by focusing on her adventurous spirit. Both families criticized the Panamanian authorities for their perceived mishandling of the case, from the delayed initial response to the lack of transparency about the autopsies. The case was officially closed by Panama, with no cause of death determined, leaving the families without closure. Today, a sign marks the summit of the El Pianista Trail, warning hikers not to proceed further. A memorial for Kris and Lisanne stands nearby, inscribed with April 1st, 2014, as their date of death, though evidence suggests they survived longer. The case continues to captivate true crime enthusiasts, with online communities dissecting the photos, phone logs, and theories. Books, documentaries, and articles have explored the mystery, yet no definitive answers have emerged. The nighttime photos, in particular, remain a haunting enigma, their blurry images a testament to the women's final days. What happened to Kris Kremers and Lisanne Freund in the Panamanian jungle? Were they victims of a tragic misadventure, lost in a merciless wilderness? Or did something more sinister befall them, hidden by the jungle's secrets? The evidence, phones, photos, bones, tells a fragmented story, one that resists a tidy conclusion. For now, the jungle keeps its silence, and the mystery endures, a poignant reminder of the risks of adventure and the fragility of life. Kris and Lisanne, with their dreams of exploration and service, set out to embrace the world. Instead, they left behind a legacy of questions, their story etched into the annals of unsolved mysteries. In the quiet coastal city of Tokaine, Aichi Prefecture, Japan, the summer of 2009 was filled with the usual anticipation of school holidays and community events. For 10-year-old Manami Shimomura, a cheerful 5th grader at Tokuname Nishi Elementary School, the season promised a special adventure, a 3-day summer camp with her classmates in the lush, forested Hiragano Kogin campground, nestled in Gujo City, Gifu Prefecture. For Manami, this was no ordinary trip. It was her first time spending nights away from her family, a milestone that filled her with excitement and a touch of nervousness. Known for her bright smile and kind heart, Manami was small for her age, standing at just 3 feet 9 inches and weighing 44 pounds. She had Down syndrome, which made some tasks more challenging, but her spirit was boundless. She loved her friends, excelled in her own way at school, and looked forward to the camp with the same enthusiasm as her peers. Little did anyone know that this trip, meant to be a joyful rite of passage, would end in one of Japan's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Manami's family was close-knit, living in a modest home where her mother, Masuyo, a nurse, and her grandmother, Yoko, nurtured her with care. She was the youngest of 3 sisters, doted on by her family, who cherished her gentle nature. In the days leading up to the camp, Manami's excitement was palpable. She packed her favorite long-sleeve t-shirt with light blue sleeves and a rabbit picture, light pink trousers, and light blue athletic shoes. Her hair was tied into pigtails with 2 scrunchies, and she wore a red name tag proudly displaying her name. Her mother helped her prepare, tucking a small camp booklet and other essentials into her bag. On a pink Tanabata strip, a traditional Japanese wish paper, Manami had written her dream, "I want to become a kanjayo," using the kanji for nurse, a nod to her mother's profession. It was a simple wish from a girl who saw the world with hope and love. On July 22, 2009, Manami boarded a bus with 85 other 5th graders and their teachers, embarking on the 2-hour journey from Tokuname to the Hiragano Kogin campground. The camp was a beloved tradition, offering children a chance to explore nature, bond with friends, and learn through outdoor activities. The campground, surrounded by dense woods and rolling hills, was a picturesque retreat, far from the bustle of city life. For Manami, it was a new world, one where she could test her independence while surrounded by the familiar faces of her classmates. The first day passed without incident. The children settled into their cabins, played games, and enjoyed the fresh mountain air. Manami, though slower in some activities due to her condition, kept up with her friends, her laughter echoing through the camp. Her teachers noted her enthusiasm, ensuring she was included in every activity. The camp was structured to keep the children safe, with adults supervising closely and schedules carefully planned. By the second day, July 24th, the group was in high spirits, preparing for a liver trial, a playful Japanese term for a test of courage, scheduled for that evening. The activity involved walking a predetermined trail through the woods, a thrilling challenge for the young campers. That morning, around 7:30 a.m., the students set out to preview the trail they would walk later that night. The path wound through the campground, crossing a small bridge and leading to a field where the group would regroup. Manami started the walk with 3 close friends, chatting and giggling as they followed the trail. Her small stature and intellectual disability made it harder for her to keep pace, but she was determined, her light blue shoes stepping carefully along the path. Her friends, accustomed to her slower speed, stayed close at first, but as the walk continued, the group naturally spread out. By 8 a.m., Manami was lagging behind, her friends a short distance ahead. The school principal, who was supervising the activity, kept an eye on the students as they progressed. He noticed Manami near the back of the group, walking steadily despite her slower pace. As the trail reached the bridge, he saw her cross it, her small figure moving with purpose. She was alone by then, the last student on the path, but still within sight. The principal waited a moment longer, ensuring no other children were coming, before turning his attention elsewhere. He assumed Manami would round the corner and rejoin her friends at the field, just a short distance away. It was a routine moment, one that should have passed without incident. but Manami never reached the field. When her 3 friends arrived at the meeting point and noticed she wasn't behind them, they grew concerned. The trail was short, and Manami had been close behind when they last saw her. 2 of the girls decided to backtrack, hoping to find her resting or catching up. They retraced their steps to the fork in the trail, calling her name, but there was no sign of her. The principal, alerted by the girls, joined the search, his initial calm giving way to unease. The trail was clear, with no obvious hazards, and Manami had been walking steadily just minutes earlier. The group scoured the area, expecting to find her sitting on a rock or wandering nearby. But as minutes turned to hours, their worry deepened. Manami Shimomura had vanished. The camp staff and teachers launched an immediate search, combing the trail and surrounding woods. By midday, the Gifu Prefectural Police were called in and a formal search operation began. Over 150 adults, including police officers, volunteers, and local residents, descended on the campground. They walked a 4-kilometer radius around the point where Manami was last seen, shouting her name and checking every possible hiding spot. The terrain was rugged but not treacherous, with dense trees, small streams, and occasional clearings. If Manami had wandered off, it seemed impossible that she could have gone far without being spotted. Yet the search yielded nothing, no footprints, no clothing, no trace of the girl who had been there just hours before. Back in Tokaname, Manami's family was notified, and Masuyo rushed to the campground, her heart pounding with fear. She couldn't fathom how her daughter, who tired easily and rarely strayed far, could disappear so completely. Masuyo joined the search, walking the trails and calling Manami's name, her voice breaking with desperation. The police considered every possibility. Had Manami gotten lost? Had she fallen into a stream or crevice? Could someone have taken her? The campground was isolated, with no reports of suspicious individuals, and the presence of so many adults and children made an abduction seem unlikely. Still, nothing was ruled out. As days turned to weeks, the search intensified. Helicopters scanned the forest from above, while divers checked nearby waterways. The police interviewed Manami's classmates, teachers, and camp staff, piecing together the timeline of her final moments. The principal's account was clear. He had seen her cross the bridge, and she was heading toward the field. The fork in the trail, where her friends had lost sight of her, was a critical point, but no evidence suggested where she had gone from there. A pair of shoes, similar to Manami's, was found months later in the woods, raising brief hopes, but police determined they did not belong to her. The absence of physical evidence was baffling. Manami's red name tag, her distinctive clothing, and her small size should have made her easy to spot, yet the forest seemed to have swallowed her whole. The media descended on the story, and Manami's disappearance became a national talking point in Japan. Her family's grief was laid bare in interviews, with Masuyo describing her daughter's gentle nature and her determination to keep up with her friends. The public was captivated by the mystery. How could a child vanish during a supervised school event in a contained area with no clues left behind? Theories abounded. Some speculated that Manami had wandered into the woods and succumbed to the elements, her small body hidden by the dense undergrowth. Others wondered if she had fallen into a sinkhole or crevice, though geological surveys found no such features in the area. A few raised the possibility of foul play, but the lack of witnesses or suspicious activity made this theory hard to substantiate. For Masuyo, the uncertainty was unbearable. She continued searching the campground long after the official efforts scaled back, walking the trails and praying for a sign of her daughter. She kept Manami's belongings close, her kanji exercise books, her camp booklet, and the pink Tanabata strip with her wish to become a nurse. In their garden, Yoko tended to a planter of morning glories, a flower Manami had loved growing in pots at school. Each year, they replanted the seeds, a quiet ritual of hope that Manami might one day return to see the flowers bloom. The family distributed flyers twice a year at JR Gifu Station and the Hiragano Plateau service area, seeking information and keeping Manami's face in the public eye. They never stopped believing she could be found. The years passed, and Manami's case grew colder. By 2018, 9 years after her disappearance, she would have been 20 years old, a milestone that brought fresh pain to her family. Masuyo spoke to reporters, her voice steady but heavy with grief, recalling how Manami would tire quickly and crouch to rest when shopping. She believed her daughter had walked with all her strength that day, trying to keep up with her friends. The Tokanin Board of Education and Gifu Prefectural Police continued to support the family's efforts, but no new leads emerged. The campground, once a place of joy, became a symbol of loss, its quiet trails holding secrets that refused to surface. Investigators revisited the case periodically, exploring new angles. Some questioned whether the supervision at the camp had been adequate, given Manami's disability and her position at the back of the group. The principal's decision to look away after seeing her cross the bridge was scrutinized, though he insisted he had followed protocol. Others wondered if Manami's classmates could have played a role, intentionally or not. Children can be cruel, and Manami's differences might have made her a target, but her friends' distress and their immediate efforts to find her suggested genuine concern. The idea of an animal attack was considered, but Japan's forests are home to few large predators, and no evidence of such an incident was found. One theory gained traction among online communities, that Manami had suffered a freak accident. The campground's terrain, while not overtly dangerous, included small streams, rocky outcrops, and thick vegetation. If Manami had stepped off the trail, perhaps to rest or explore, she could have fallen into a hidden crevice or been caught in dense underbrush. Her small size and light clothing might have made her remains difficult to spot, especially if covered by leaves or moss. The massive search effort, while thorough, could have missed a tiny anomaly in the vast forest. This theory, while plausible, offered little comfort, as it left open the question of why no trace of her was ever found. Another possibility, though less likely, was that Manami had been taken. The campground was remote, but not inaccessible, and a fleeting opportunity could have allowed someone to approach her unnoticed. Japan has seen rare cases of abductions, but the lack of witnesses, tire tracks, or other evidence made this scenario improbable. The police also considered whether Manami had intentionally hidden, perhaps overwhelmed by the camp or a moment of confusion, but her intellectual disability and trusting nature made this unlikely. She was a child who loved her friends and family, with no history of running away. As the case faded from the headlines, it remained a touchstone for those who followed unresolved mysteries. On forums like Reddit, users debated the details, piecing together the timeline and speculating about what could have happened in those critical minutes after Manami crossed the bridge. Some pointed to the eerie silence of the case, no screams, no signs of struggle, no clues, as evidence of how quickly a tragedy can unfold. Others expressed frustration at the lack of answers, wondering if a more immediate or extensive search could have made a difference. The story resonated deeply, a reminder of the fragility of childhood and the limits of human control in the face of nature's vastness. Manami's family never gave up. Masuyo and Yoko continued their rituals of remembrance, tending to the morning glories and distributing flyers. They held on to the hope that someone, somewhere, might know something, a hiker who saw a scrap of clothing, a driver who noticed a child near the road. The Tokanin community rallied around them, organizing vigils and keeping Manami's name alive. Her school preserved her artwork, including a painting of morning glories she had made just weeks before her disappearance, captioned with the words, "I was very happy." It was a heartbreaking glimpse into a life cut short, or at least lost to the unknown. In 2025, 16 years after Manami vanished, the case remains open, a wound that refuses to heal. The Hiragano Kogen campground is still in use, its trails trodden by new generations of campers, but for those who know the story, it carries a shadow. The police maintain an active file, and tips are still directed to the Tokaname School Education Division. Advances in technology, such as ground-penetrating radar or DNA analysis, have been suggested as possible tools for a renewed search, but the vastness of the area and the passage of time make such efforts daunting. The family's hope, though tempered by years of silence, endures, fueled by the love they hold for a girl who touched their lives so profoundly. Manami Shimomura's Disappearance is a story of innocence, loss, and the unrelenting search for truth. It is a mystery that defies easy answers, leaving behind questions that echo through the years. Where did she go in those fleeting moments? How could a child vanish so completely? For Masuyo, Yoko, and the countless others who loved her, Manami is more than a case. She is a daughter, a granddaughter, a friend, a girl who dreamed of being a nurse, who walked with all her heart, and who, somewhere in the quiet of the forest, left a mark that time cannot erase.